there any misconception any of you in the audience have about lawyers? Is there anybody who had this idea about lawyers before coming for this event? We'd just like to hear from you. Anyone who would like to share something okay, yes, we have a volunteer at the back. Thank you.
Yes, please come.
If you could come forward, please. Thank you.
Good morning. Well, it is believed that lawyers are liars.
Okay. Any other person?
Well, to demystify that, I think we'd rather just say that it depends on the personality of the persons involved. All right, any other myths? All right.
Everybody needs someone who would speak up for them, no matter the circumstance.
You want to tell us something?
And that is what a lawyer is, yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So what I know about a lawyer is just like they decide the rules that people should carry on and etc.
All right, please let's jam our hands together for him.
Thank you.
He's done so well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And in the same vein, I just want to hear from one or two of us. So, in spite of all these misconceptions you had about lawyers, I mean, we're liars, we get buried upside down, and all that, you still came. And that's because you have certain expectations. There is something you want to take out of this program. So I want to know, is there anyone who would like to share with us what they're expecting to get out of this program? Anybody?
Anybody?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Yes, he's bringing the mic to you.
Good morning, everyone. Okay, so I look forward to insightful knowledge. And I have a couple of things that's been on my mind. So when I got to know about this, I'm like, oh, I need to be here to glean from the knowledge of team of experts.
Right. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very
Thank you. Okay, our little friend still has to say something. He wants to say something.
Hello again.
Hi.
So what I want to achieve is just to know everything about the world, go to different countries and meet all their members and
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a lawyer in the making. Yeah. I mean, it's obvious, right?
Yes. Thank you. So thank you so much for sharing your expectations from today's meeting. You want to share? Okay. We have one more person. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I look forward to being a landlord, okay. And I'd really like to understand the legal intricacies involved in being a landlord, how landlords and tenants ought to behave. I hear there's a lot of challenge when there are disputes between the landlord and the tenants, especially in Abuja. So I look forward to learning a bit more than what I already know about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very much, yes.
Thank you for sharing your expectations. And what we promise to do at this meeting is to educate you. Right? At this meeting, we hope to equip you with the necessary information you need to have about your rights, your remedies on different issues. And so we have different legal experts who are going to be speaking to us on different aspects of law, including landlord and tenancy issues like you raised. And what we hope to achieve is that by the end of this meeting, you should have all the information you need at your fingertips. And even if you don't have it, you would know who you can speak to, who and who you can reach out to. So we encourage you to all pay rapt attention, sit tight, and just focus throughout the entire program because we intend to answer every question you have. Thank you.
That's right, Ada. So jumping right into what we have for you, I believe some of you would have been wondering, when you saw TJLC. What is TJLC all about? And why are we gathered here? Our first speaker is a seasoned lawyer who has invested over 3 decades in the legal profession. He is a dedicated member of the Lawyer Specialized Focus Group, a graduate of the University of Lagos and an alumnus of the London Academy Business School. He is presently Director of Legal Services at the National Power Training Institute of Nigeria, NAPTIN. Please join me welcome upstage Mr. Kunle Oyenosi. Please let's jam our hands together for him.
Thank you, Ralph and Adaolisa. Good morning, church. How are we all doing today? All right. Shall we just start with a word of prayer? Can we be upstanding? Psalm 68, verse 33 says, "To him who rides on the heaven of heavens, which were of old, indeed he sends out his voice, a mighty voice. Ascribe strength to God, his excellence is over Israel, and his strength is in the clouds. O God, you are more awesome than your holy places. The God of Israel is he who gives strength and power to his people. Blessed be God." Let's just lift up our hands and just say thank you, Lord, this morning. Lord, we give you praise, we give you glory, we give you honor, we exalt your holy name. Thank you for this event of today. Thank you for this meeting. Thank you that you have made me one of those that will be here. Thank you because your light will shine through for us even in today's meeting. Thank you, Father. Thank you because knowledge will find me. Thank you because solutions will come to my challenges. And at the end of this meeting, your glory will radiate over this all and over every family. Thank you, Heavenly Father. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Father, we thank you once again. Thank you for the awesome presence that we have started to enjoy already. As we gather here, let your name be glorified. Let knowledge find us. Let solutions come to all those who have come with burdens. You are the lifter of burdens, O Lord. We thank you that your name will be glorified at the end of the day. Thank you, Ancient of Days. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Let's be seated. Once again, I want to welcome every one of us to today's meeting. It is such a joy to welcome you to the inaugural open house of the Jason Legal Clinic, which we have tagged TJLC, being hosted by the Lawyers Specialized Focus Group of the House on the Rock, the Refuge. I am glad you made it to this event today. Let me just quickly tell us what this clinic today is about. The clinic, the legal clinic, is more than just about law or legal advice. It is about care, it is about service, and it is about attending the love of Christ in practical ways. What we're doing is we're sharing God's love in practical ways in our professional capacity to be able as lawyers, especially lawyers of this house in the specialized focus group, to show to our brethren that we care about what you're going through, that we want to know what your problems are, what your legal needs are, and we want to be able to just solve them. As you know, the law is not merely a set of rules, it is a tool for justice. The law is a tool for fairness. It is a tool for service. And through this clinic, what we're doing is that we're creating a platform where professional expertise will meet with genuine compassion and ensuring that legal guidance is not a privilege of the few, but also a resource that is available to many. As you will know that many in our church or in our community face challenges where just a little guidance will make a difference, where it can restore peace of mind, where it can restore dignity, where it can also open doors to new possibilities. That is what we're here to do. The lawyers' specialized focus group is here to serve, we're here to listen, and we're here to walk along those that are in need. Now, what is our vision? Our vision is to bridge the gap that is between knowledge and need. We want to be able to empower individuals with clarity and direction, and to stand as a beacon of integrity in our church and in our community at large. Now, the Lawyers SFG is here to support the work of the ministry by demonstrating that our profession, the legal profession, can be a ministry. In other words, it can be a way that we can show compassion. It can be a way that we can protect the vulnerable and promoting justice with mercy. I want to assure you that today marks a truly impactful day, and our prayer is that today's legal clinic will be a light in our church. Can we say amen? It will be a place of refuge where people can find help, where they can find hope, and where they can find healing. Let me use this opportunity to also thank the leadership of the church that has given us this opportunity to come together as a group, as a professional group, to also minister to our brethren in the church. You know, like I said, that what we are doing is we are showing that we do have the capacity, but we're not just keeping that capacity for a commercial use only. We're using that capacity to also be a blessing to the church. Now, quickly, the Lawyers SFG. What we do is, what I can just say in three, we have three core mandates. We provide support to lawyers in the refuge. That is our first mandate. We come together as a law group, as a specialized focus group, and then we come together to give support to ourselves. We also do increased capacity building. We do increased networking and mentoring, and we also hope that by coming together, our finances should also be able to improve. We should not just be lawyers who are struggling. We should be lawyers who pray together. We should be lawyers who can get commercial businesses to do with ourselves together. And then we see how we can lift ourselves up, where senior lawyers can interact with junior lawyers. We don't even have that dichotomy so much between ourselves, but we come together to see areas that we can actually lift ourselves. Also, we provide legal services to parishioners. I'm sure that some of us would have seen that if you go outside of the church, under the canopy there, you will see that we have a desk that is maintained by the Lawyers SFG. SFG, by the way, like I said, is the specialized focus group. And what we do there is that if you have quick need for legal advice, basic legal advice, you can quickly come to us, and then we can assign a lawyer to actually assist you. We also promote legal services to our community. You know, we do it in the church, and then if there are people who are around us that we can also help, like you hear somebody has been unlawfully detained in a prison cell, we can quickly be of benefit. And then if the cases get a bit more complex, what we do is that we can assign that to a lawyer, and then we charge giving a rebate. So it's not the commercial rate that you pay. And I want to tell you that as the clinic go on today, you will actually see that we've done quite a lot in the church before now, and we are poised to even do much more. Now, the TJLC, which is the Jason Legal Clinic that we're holding today, we are having the inaugural open house today. This initiative is flowing from the Lawyers Specialized Focus Group, like I've said. This is just an initiative that has been expanded in a way that it has more broader components. We have 7 major components, and I'll just quickly, in the next 2-3 minutes, take us through those components. Number 1, I talked about the legal aid desk, which is a legal advisory desk that functions on Sundays. That desk is where on weekday, Sundays. We're out there. Sunday, you will find our desk just outside under the canopy there. Secondly, the open house is what we are actually inaugurating today. Now, what the open house does is that every year we will hold this meeting. Every year, and we begin that, it will begin to expand even as we go on year. Every year it would expand. Now, it's an annual event that serves like an enlightenment and open networking event that is providing the church and the church community with opportunity to learn more about legal rights. I had my sister Ada saying, some people are even saying, what do lawyers even do? You know, today that mystery of what lawyers do will be broken. What we do is that we offer humanitarian support. We offer quality legal advisory support. Now, what you will do is that in a relaxed atmosphere, where you don't go to chambers. You know, some of us, even when you want to go and see lawyers in chambers, you will shiver sometimes. But when you come here, you know that we're all children of God. You want to see a brother, and we believe that at the end of today, you should be able to actually meet a lawyer. Tell them what your challenges are. Tell them what your problems are. Tell them what advice. I had my brother say he wants to be a landlord, and he wants to know what are the duties and the things that a landlord should do, the rights, the benefits. So all those things, you'll be able to do it in a relaxed, in a fun, and in a more relaxed atmosphere, while also providing solutions to your challenges. So it is not just that you tell us, it is also that we also find solutions to those problems. Now, as time goes on, we live in Abuja, and we know that Abuja has a few challenges about housing. That is a recognized fact. One of the things that we also plan to do is to have what we call the real estate development project. And that is aimed at affording housing solutions to our members by assisting them to become home or property owners. So, yeah, if you want to clap, I think you can clap for Jesus. Let's do it better. So, with time, these are the things that we will be doing. We would also get in touch with a real estate specialized focus group, and we will have them join hands with us, where we can also have plans to develop such projects, where we can say that every member of the House on the Road to Refuge is a property owner. It is possible. The Bible says, the earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, everyone in it. All of us belong to God, and the land belongs to God. Now, we have the amicable, another part of our program is the Amicable Resolution Center. What this offers is alternative remedial dispute resolution mechanism. Now, it might sound big. Let me break it down, because we're talking to non-lawyers. Now, in the church, do you know there are disputes? The apostle writing said that we should not take our cases to the courts. We should not go, I should not have a problem against my brother Godfrey now, and then I go and swing. What we should be doing is we should have a mechanism in the church that can resolve our differences. Now, that is one of the things that we will be doing under this open house, under the legal clinic, under the open house. We will be finding ways of resolving resolutions. If you have little commercial, somebody sold land to me, somebody sold a car, somebody sold me a bike. He was supposed to pay 100,000, he paid 60, didn't pay the rest. No, we shouldn't go and sue ourselves in the courts. What we should do is we should have a place where we can come and we can actually resolve that. For sake of time, I would just like to just summarize the last three. One is limited regulatory compliance service, where we can file annual returns for small businesses for a maximum of 1 to 5 years. If you have a business and you want to file annual returns, contact the lawyers SFG. We will be able to do something to support you. Also, we have the independent service, which is an online, which is a one-time service that we give to the church. Church may have some challenges, we'll take it up. And then we have specific services that are given to partners of the lawyers SFG, and then the lawyers SFG prison administration. You know, people are in prison out there, some don't have relatives. Some of this time we can actually go to assist them. So basically, that is what the legal SFG has been doing, and that is what this inaugural open house is all about. Permit me to quickly go through the bio of one of our speakers, in fact, our guest speaker today. I'll just quickly go through his bio, and then it will come on in the next few minutes. Now, Mr. Chukwuka Ikwezom, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, is our guest speaker for today. He is a Senior Advocate of Nigeria, as we have stated. He is also a fellow of the Chartered Taxation Institute. He is a partner in the Dispute Resolution and Tax Practice of Aluko and Oyebode. That's a prestigious law firm, and heads the firm's taxation practice. He was elevated to the prestigious rank of Senior Advocate of Nigeria in December 2020. He is a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, as I said, and was a member of the Institute's indirect tax facility for several years. He obtained an LLB from the University of Nigeria Enugu campus and an LLM from Columbia University, New York. He is admitted to both the Nigerian and the New York State bars. Chukwuka is a recipient of the Harlan Fiske Stone Prize for Academic Excellence from Columbia University in 2009, and he also received the Judith R. and Michael E. Toya Scholarship for LLM students with outstanding academic credentials in 2008 to 2009. He has a considerable tax advisory and educatory experience and leads Aluko and Oyebode's team representing clients in all tax disputes in which the firm has been instructed, including the team representing an international commodities trading company in proceedings against FIRS in one of the largest tax disputes in Nigeria. He has been shortlisted as Tax Litigation Lawyer of the Year for the 2025 ITR Awards for Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and he is a thought leader who regularly facilitates trainings in taxation and other subjects. He served as the chairman of the Nigerian Bar Association Lagos branch from 2017 to 2019. He will be joining us online to deliver his address. Please make welcome with a standing ovation. Even though he's not here, let's just get up and just honor the grace of God in his life as we stand up and clap to receive Mr. Chukwuka.
Wait, make I go.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, I'm happy to start if you can. Okay. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to have the opportunity to be part of your event this morning. And I'd like to thank the leadership of the church and this group for inviting me to be part of this event. Interestingly, today is my birthday, and I'm happy to share it with you, speaking on a subject that's very close to my heart. That's the subject of taxation. I've been asked to speak on, the new tax acts. I understand I have 25 minutes to do that. Unfortunately, I don't think that even in 2 hours, I'll be able to speak to all the important changes that have been introduced by the new tax acts. So I have slides, which I intend to make available to your team. The slides are self-explanatory. So what I'm going to be doing in the next 25 minutes is to speak to the most important changes that have been or that will be introduced to the tax regime in Nigeria starting from 1st of January 2026. So on the 26th of June this year, the president of our country signed into law a number of 4 pieces of legislation. The Nigerian Tax Act, the Nigerian Tax Administration Act, the Nigerian Revenue Service Establishment Act, and the Joint Revenue Board Establishment Act. Collectively, for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to be referring to all the 4 new tax acts simply as the new tax acts. Now, these tax acts have introduced significant changes to the tax landscape in Nigeria. They have amended a number of tax laws. Of course, you will know that, we have different types of taxes: personal income tax, companies income tax, Stamp Duties Act, Value-Added Tax, Petroleum Profit Tax Act. Now, under the current regime, all these tax laws have separate statutory enactments that regulate them. Now, one of the major changes that the new tax regime has brought is to consolidate all the pieces of legislation into one. So you now have the Nigerian Tax Act, which has made provisions relating to taxation of companies, taxation of individuals, taxation of trusts, taxation of companies that operate in the oil and gas sector, value-added tax, capital gains tax, Stamp Duties Act. You have provisions relating to all of these taxes now in the Nigerian Tax Act. Now, what the Nigerian Revenue Service Establishment Act has done is to rename what is today known as the Federal Inland Revenue Service and then make it the umbrella body that will have responsibility for accounting for all revenues that accrue to the federal government. So it is not my understanding that the Nigerian Revenue Service will take over the core functions of organizations like the Nigerian Customs. No, the Nigerian Customs will continue to carry on its core mandate. But when it comes to revenue collection, the Nigerian Revenue Service, which is the new body that's been created to take over the functions of the Federal Inland Revenue Service, will have responsibility for all these tax revenues accruing to the federal government. Now, I will just go on to, talk about, the changes that have been made as they affect individuals and companies. So, for individuals, the first thing you need to know is that every taxable person, and every taxable person will mean any person who earns income in Nigeria. Every taxable person shall register for tax and obtain a tax ID. This is compulsory. You can't even open a bank account without this tax ID. So if you are in employment or you carry on business as an individual, you have an obligation to register and obtain a tax ID. Before now, the taxation of individuals, we had the Personal Income Tax Act, provided for a graduated rate of taxes. So, and that's why it's called pay as you earn. You pay according to your income bracket. So under the current tax regime, I use the current tax regime to represent what we have at the moment, because, like I said, the new tax acts have a commencement date of 1st of January 2026. So when I talk about the current tax regime, I'm talking about what applies as of this time, and will continue to apply until 1st of January 2026. So what the Personal Income Tax Act has done is to provide a graduated rate of taxes for individuals, depending on how much the individual is earning. So if you earn 300,000, the first 300,000 naira that you earn, the tax rate is 7%. The second 300,000, the tax rate is 11%. Then the next 500,000 has a tax rate of 15%. The next 500,000 will have 19%. And then it goes on like that. And then anything above 3.2 million will be 24%. Now, all of that has been changed under the new tax regime. So you have a different set of rates now. And what I think is critical is that your first 800,000 naira is totally tax-free. So unlike in the past where your first 300,000, if you earn 300,000 naira per annum, you have to pay tax of 7% on the 300,000. Now, if you earn 800,000, you don't even pay any tax at all. That's 0%. Then you also have the next 2,200, 2.2 million naira. It's taxed at 15%. And then next 9 million at 18%. Then the next 13 million at 21%. So the way this works in practice is that if you earn, say, 20 million naira per annum, the way your tax liability will be computed is that out of the 200 million, the first 800,000 is treated as tax-free because there's 0% tax applying to it. Then the next 2.2 million. So if you earn 3 million, that's 2.2 million plus 800,000. Then your tax rate will be 15,000, but the 15,000 will apply to just the 2.2 million. And it goes on like that. The next 9 million, 18%, next 13 million, 21%, and so forth, and so on and so forth. So the new tax regime has a more progressive tax rates than what we have in the current regime. One thing to keep in mind is that under the current regime, before your income is subjected to tax, to personal income tax, you are allowed what was called a consolidated revenue allowance. The consolidated revenue allowance was 200,000 naira or 20% of your gross income, whichever is higher. Now, that has been taken away under the current regime. Under the new regime, what you now have is a 20% annual rent allowance. Now, but there are certain conditions attached to this allowance. First is that your residence, where you live, you must not own it. You must be renting it. If you're renting it, then 20% of the rent you pay every month, you can claim as an allowance, but subject to a maximum of 500,000. So if your rent is 10 million, 20% of that will obviously be more than 500,000. That means you can only claim 500,000 as rent allowance under the new regime. And after that, whatever is left will have to be subjected to tax using the graduated rates that I just told you about. Now, what is also important is that the new tax regime makes some favorable provisions for, small businesses. So small companies are defined as companies that earn annual turnover of not more than 50 million. with total fixed assets of less than 250 million. Now, this is progressive in the sense that under the current regime, small companies are also exempt from tax, but the threshold to qualify as a small company is smaller under the current regime than in the new regime. That threshold is 25 million. So today, if you run a company and your total annual turnover is 25 million or less, you'll be exempt from tax. But under the new regime, that threshold has been increased from 25 million to 50 million. And then the new tax regime introduces a 15% minimum effective tax rate for multinational enterprises and Nigerian companies with annual revenue of 20 billion or more. So if you're a Nigerian company and you make 20 billion or more in a year, then you must pay a minimum tax, regardless of what your actual tax liability is. You must pay a minimum tax of 15% of your annual revenue. Then the new tax regime also introduces a 4% development levy. Now, this is going to replace the fragmented levies that we have under the current regime. So under the current regime, there is the tertiary education tax and all kinds of levies. All of those have been consolidated and replaced by a flat 4% development levy that's going to be paid by every Nigerian company. Now, there's also a provision in the new tax law, in the new tax regime, that seeks to tax gains arising from indirect transfers of ownership of companies and assets by a non-resident company. So let me explain what this means. If a non-resident company, a non-resident person sets up a holding company, say in the Bahamas or in any of the tax havens, and then uses that holding company to buy shares in a Nigerian company, under the current regime, if the shares in the foreign holding company are transferred and a gain is recorded, there was no Nigerian capital gains tax because what was sold were not the shares of a Nigerian company. What has changed is that under the new tax regime, if you use a foreign holding company to buy shares in a Nigerian company, and you sell the shares of that foreign holding company, not the shares of the Nigerian company, but that sale results in a change of management of the Nigerian company, then you'll be liable to pay Nigerian capital gains tax on that foreign transaction. So it's something that's new and different. And then another change that has been introduced by the new tax regime is there is now a mandatory disclosure of tax planning arrangements. Now, what are tax planning arrangements? You know, we say in tax that while tax evasion is a crime, tax avoidance is not. So there is no obligation on you as a citizen to pay the most amount of tax. You can adopt measures that are legal, not illegal, measures that are legal to minimize the tax that you pay. And that's what tax practitioners call tax planning. So tax planning is not illegal because you're not evading tax, you're just avoiding tax. What the new tax regime has said is that if you are implementing any tax planning arrangement, any arrangement that, although not patently illegal, but will lead to a minimization of the tax that you have to pay, you have an obligation to disclose that tax planning arrangement to the tax authority. So it's a new provision. It will take effect, like I said, on the 1st of January 2026, when the new tax act come into force. Now, one of the taxes that businesses pay is value-added tax. It's a consumption tax that is paid by consumers. Whenever you receive a service or you buy goods, if the goods or services are not exempt from value-added tax, you have an obligation to pay VAT on them. Now, the VAT that you pay is the excess or the difference between what we call output VAT and input VAT. And I will explain that so you understand it. If you are a manufacturer of mobile phones, the materials that you buy to be able to manufacture the mobile phone, you pay VAT on them if they are not exempt from VAT. Now, that VAT that you pay to you is input VAT because it's VAT that you paid on the things that you impute into your manufacturing process. Now, after you have produced the mobile phone and you're selling it, the VAT that you charge is called output VAT. Now, what you pay over to the tax authority is the difference between the output VAT that you received and the input VAT that you paid. Now, under the current regime, you could only claim input VAT on goods that you use directly in the manufacture or in the manufacturing of the products that you're selling. You couldn't claim VAT, input VAT on services or fixed assets. Those you would only be entitled to expense in your profit and loss account. Now, what the new tax regime has done is to say that, look, you can claim all input VAT, whether they relate to services, whether they relate to fixed assets. You can claim all input VAT, provided that the goods or the services on which you paid the input VAT resulted in the production of the products or services that you're selling. Now, this has a significant impact on cash flow because under the current regime, where you're required to expense certain kinds of input VAT, you would not be able to recover that until when you're filing your tax returns at the end of your financial year. But under the new regime, where you're actually allowed to claim input VAT, you will have what we call time value of money, because at the time you're paying the output VAT, you're taking out your input VAT at the same time. Now, there's a provision in the new tax regime that any expense on which VAT or import duty is outstanding, you cannot deduct for the purposes of your tax, computing your tax liability. So what that simply means is when you're running a business, to determine your taxable profits, you have to deduct all the expenses that you incurred in the course of your business. Now, let's say that some of the expenses that you incurred, you ought to have paid VAT on them, but you failed to pay VAT on those expenses. When you seek to deduct them for the purposes of computing your tax liability, the tax authorities will not allow you to deduct them until you have paid a VAT or import duty on them. Then, I mentioned that, I haven't mentioned it. Under the Capital Gains Tax Act, right, when you own, and this should interest all of us, everyone who has shares in any company in Nigeria or intends to buy shares in any company in Nigeria. In the past, when you transferred shares, when you sold your shares in a bank, say GTB, Zenith Bank, whatever Nigerian company, any gain that you made from the sale of those shares was totally exempt from capital gains tax. You didn't have to pay any tax on it. So let's say you bought 50,000 units of the shares of a bank at 5 million naira, and 2 years down the road, you're selling those shares for 5 million. The gain that you make from the sale was totally exempt from tax. But there was an amendment introduced by one of the Finance Acts, I think 2 or 3 years, that now said, look, if you sell shares in a Nigerian company and you make, if you sell shares in a Nigerian company and the total value of the shares is 100 million or more, you have to pay capital gains tax on the profit that you make. The only exception being where you reinvest the proceeds into the purchase of the shares of another Nigerian company. Now, the new tax acts have increased the threshold for that liability from 100 million to 150 million. So what it means is that from 1st of January 2026, if you sell your shares in a Nigerian company and the total value of the shares is less than 150 million, you will not have to pay any tax on it. But if it is more than 150 million, you have to pay tax. Now, but there's another provision that says, even if the total value is less than 150 million, if the gain that you make in the sale of those shares is 10 million naira or more, you have to pay capital gains tax on that gain. Keep in mind that if you reinvest the proceeds of the sale, if you use the proceeds of the sale to buy shares in another Nigerian company, then you will not be liable to pay any tax. One other innovation in the new tax regime is, 0% VAT on certain essential goods, and I've listed all the essential goods in the slide. Basic food items, medical and pharmaceutical products, excluding cosmetology, fitness devices, and other similar devices. So you have all the essential goods and services that are now zero rated. Now, what does it mean when we say that a service or a product is zero rated? What it means is that the person who manufactured the goods or who rendered the services is entitled to claim input VAT, but would not be entitled to charge output VAT. So that's the difference. When you hear zero rated, that's the difference between zero rated and exemption from VAT entirely. If a product is exempt from VAT, it means that input VAT cannot be paid on the product, output VAT cannot be charged. But zero rated means you can pay input VAT, but you don't charge output VAT. And then this is very, very important. Very, very important. And I consider this to be one of the major changes of the new tax regime, the alignment of the rate of capital gains tax with the rate of income tax. Now, I think that what drove this change is the controversy, with respect to what amounts to a business profit and what amounts to a capital gain. There are many cases that the courts have decided on this issue, but I can tell you that there's still no clarity on what qualifies as a business profit and what qualifies as a capital gain. Now, the way I try to explain it, if you own apple trees and every year those apple trees bear apples and you harvest the apples and you sell, that arguably will qualify as business profit. What the revenue you earn from selling the apples will qualify as business profits. But when you decide that, look, I'm done with this business, and you decide to sell the apple trees themselves, then what you earn is a capital gain, right? But there are situations that will not fit neatly into either of these two categories. So as a lawyer, when you're rendering services, what you earn will be your business profits. If you decide to sell your law firm, the books, everything you have, your stock in trade, you decide to sell everything, what you earn is a capital gain. Now, under the current regime, capital gain is taxed as 10%, while companies' income tax is at 30% for large companies. Now, what this means is that if a company is able to characterize its revenue as a capital gain rather than as a business profit, it will only pay 10% on that profit or capital gain. But if it is classified as a business profit, it will be 30%. So there has been a lot of tax evasion on this, people mischaracterizing, the nature of the revenue that they earn in order to, have the lower tax rate of 10% for capital gains apply. So what the new tax regime has done is to say, look, whether it is a capital gain or a business profit, the same rate will apply. What this means is that a company that pays 30% tax on its business profits will also pay 30% tax on its capital gain. An individual will have to pay the rate. Remember, I told you that for personal income tax, the rates are graduated. So if the graduated rate for the income is 25%, that's what you will pay, whether it is a business income or a capital gain. So it's one of the most important changes that the new tax acts have introduced. Now, under the current regime, I think it's Section 21 of the Companies Income Tax Act, there are provisions relating to closed companies. A closed company is defined as a company that has 5 shareholders or less. Now, and maybe 3 of my children, and we're all 5 of us are shareholders. I know that if I distribute dividends to myself and all the other shareholders, we would be liable to pay tax, withholding tax on the dividends. So we may decide not to distribute the dividends, just keep the money in the company and find ways of taking the money out. So the company can be paying rent for us, doing a lot of things for us. We would not have a formal declaration of dividends, but we find innovative ways to take money out of that company. That's the reason the law says if you fail to declare a dividend and the tax authority is satisfied that you could have declared a dividend without any damage being done to your business, then they will deem the dividends as distributed and tax you accordingly. What the new tax regime has done is to amend slightly those provisions to say that the provisions will not apply to any company that has a corporate shareholder. So if you have what ordinarily should be a closed company, but one of the shareholders is a limited liability company, then those provisions would not apply to that company. So I will go very quickly to discuss some compliance obligations. Like I said, I'm not going to be able to talk about everything I have on the slides, but the good thing is that the slides are self-explanatory, so you can look at them at your leisure and get all the information. I'm just trying to touch on, aspects of, some of the changes that I consider relevant to the people in the room. So every business is required to deduct and remit personal income taxes of its employees. So if you are listening to me and you have a company or you have a business and you have employees, you have an obligation to, at the end of every month, deduct pay as you earn tax, personal income tax for all your employees. You deduct them. The way you calculate them is using the graduated rates that I already spoke about. So if an employee is earning 800,000, of course, you know that there is no tax liability for that employee, because under the new tax regime, people who earn 800,000 naira or less annually are totally exempt from personal income tax. So you use the graduated rates to calculate what the personal income tax liability of each of your employees is, and then you deduct it at source before you pay that person. So if you calculate it on an annual basis, and if the annual tax is, say, 1.2 million, what it means is that you divide 1.2 million by 12. Every month before you pay the employee, you deduct 100,000 from the employee's salary, and you pay it over to the relevant tax authority. So if your business is in Lagos, the relevant tax authority will be the Lagos Internal Revenue Service. If your business is in Abuja, the relevant tax authority will be the Internal Revenue Service of the Federal Capital Territory. Then for incorporated entities, there's an obligation to file annual returns no later than the 30th day of June of following the end of your financial year. So if your financial year is from 1st of January to 31st of December, then you must file by the 30th of June. You must file your tax returns. In Nigeria, we operate a system of self-assessment, which simply means that the tax authority trusts you to properly calculate your tax and then pay it over to the tax authority. So you file your returns. Your returns, you should attach your audited accounts to your returns, and then you identify all sources of profits for that particular year. You claim all the allowances that the law allows you to claim, and then you determine your taxable profits. You apply the applicable rate to it, and you determine what your tax is, and then you pay the tax. Now, what then happens is, if your tax authority has any reason to suspect that you have not properly calculated your tax liability, the tax authority can come and conduct an audit. They will ask you to provide underlying documents. They will look at it to confirm that the information you have put in your tax returns is correct. Now, that's for companies' income tax. There's also a filing obligation for value-added tax. All suppliers of taxable goods or services are required to register for VAT with the FAIRS upon commencement of business. So this includes lawyers. I have noted with dismay that a lot of our colleagues in the legal profession, you just bill a client 5 million. The client just pays the 5 million and you take the 5 million and you start to spend it. No. When you provide services, including legal services, you have an obligation to issue a VAT invoice. It doesn't have to be a separate invoice. It could be the same invoice where your professional fee is contained. But you have to separate the value-added tax from your professional fee. And the rate of VAT is 7.5%. So if your professional fee is 5 million naira, you have to include VAT at 7.5% of 5 million. So in total, your client should be paying to you 5 million plus 7.5% of 5 million. And the 7.5% is not yours. It belongs to the tax authority. So when you collect that, you pay it over to the relevant tax authority and you get a receipt for the payment. Now, we need to note that every business that makes taxable supplies of less than 50 million under the new tax regime will be exempt from VAT. So this is consistent with, the provisions that seek to protect small businesses. So under the current regime, the threshold is 25 million, but it's been increased to 50 million. So if you run a small business and your total revenue in a year is 50 million or less, then you don't have an obligation to charge and remit VAT. So consequences of non-compliance with the tax provisions under the new regime. I think the most important that we should be aware of is there is now a provision that interest and penalties, interest are to be compounded. So by way of a background, when you fail to pay tax when it is due, and a tax is due when an assessment has become final and conclusive, of course, Nigerian law has a process for challenging a tax liability. So if a tax authority has issued an assessment with which you do not agree, the law allows you 30 days to object to that tax assessment. If you object, then the tax authority will consider your objection and either accept it or reject it. If it is rejected, the tax authority will issue what we call a notice of refusal to amend. Now, you must file an appeal against the NORA within 30 days of your receipt of the NORA. If you fail to file an appeal, the assessment becomes final and conclusive. If you fail to make an objection, the assessment becomes final and conclusive. And the law is that any tax that is due but is not paid at the time that is due will attract penalty and interest. Now, the new tax regime has increased the penalties and the interest that are payable. But most importantly, there is now a provision that the interest are to be compounded. And this compounding of interest can have significant effect on how much tax you'll be paying overall. So my advice is any tax that is not disputed, try and pay it as soon as you can to avoid, penalties and interests accumulating on the tax liability, especially interests at a compounded rate. But like I said, you also need to keep in mind that the new tax regime has a provision that tax obligations that are outstanding by the time the new tax regime comes into effect on the 1st of January 2026 will be affected by the compounding of interest. So it is not just going to be forward-looking. If you have outstanding liabilities that you have not cleared, as of 1st of January 2026, compound interest rates will apply. So it's important that you look at your fiscal affairs right away, and if there are any liabilities that are outstanding, you take steps to get them settled. So I think I've exhausted my 25 minutes. I'm sure that a lot more information will come out when we go to Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leonard Silk. So we have a few questions, Leonard Silk. I don't know if you can see me.
Yes, go ahead. I can't see you, but I can hear you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Before we go into the questions, I'll just add that, since we're in a church setting, right? Jesus, who we emulate, was a taxpayer. Yes, he did not just pay tax for himself. He also paid for his employee, Peter. Yeah, so I'm sure we have taken a very good example from our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Okay, so let's just head right into the questions. And if you have any questions, please, this is the QR code to post your questions. Leonard Silk, I recently bought this is personal, some art materials for kids at a large store, and I was surprised to see VAT charged on a glitter color, which I understand should be zero rated as an educational material. In such situations like this, where VAT is wrongly charged on zero-rated goods or goods that are supposed to be tax-exempt, what steps can consumers take to recover their money or report such cases?
Okay, thank you very much. So if you're charged VAT on an item or service that is either exempt or zero-rated, you shouldn't pay. You should right there and then tell the person who's the supplier of the goods or the services that this product or this service is tax exempt or zero rated, and that there's no basis for the VAT. And if the supplier does not amend the tax invoice to remove the VAT, don't pay it. And you can take steps to report that supplier to. So one of the interesting changes, time did not allow me to mention it, in the new tax regime is that there's now going to be an office of the tax ombudsman, just like a complaints commission for tax purposes. So you can refuse to pay, take steps to report that supplier to either the tax ombudsman or even the Nigerian Revenue Service, which will be the successor of the Federal Inland Revenue Service. Where you have already paid, you should insist on a refund. You should tell the person to give you a refund that VAT is not applicable. Again, if the person fails to give you a refund, you have to escalate it to either the tax ombuds office or the Nigerian Revenue Service. The point to note is, if the law says there is no VAT, then there's no basis for anybody to charge it. And you should be able to stand up against the person and say, there is no basis for you to include VAT on your invoice.
Thank you. The next question. The Nigerian Tax Act exempts small companies from income tax and development levy, as who may not even know their filing obligations. How exactly can they claim these exemptions and still obtain a tax clearance certificate?
Hello?
Okay, I'll take that again. The
Yeah,
Nigerian
please. I lost you
Tax
for a
Act
moment.
exempts small companies from income tax and development levy. For small business owners who may not even know their filing obligations, how exactly can they claim these exemptions and still obtain a tax clearance certificate?
Well, when you say for small companies who may obligations, there's a problem there, because tax exemption does not equal exemption from filing obligations. So whether you're a small business or a big business, you need to understand your filing obligations, right? And, you know, what you will typically do if you're not an accountant is to get an accountant to assist with the preparation of your returns, the returns that you file. And once you prepare those returns and you file them, then the exemption is automatic, you know, because at the end of the day, you calculate your tax liability and you have a nil tax payable. So the point to make is you cannot say that because you're a small business, you're not aware of your filing obligations. Every potential taxpayer, whether the person is exempt or not, has an obligation to register for tax and file tax returns. And it is in your tax returns that you provide information that actually shows that you're a small company. So remember that one of the documents that you attach to your returns will be your accounts. So your accounts will show what your annual revenue is, and that it is less than the threshold, you know, for a tax payment. If you do not file a tax return, there's no way for the tax authority to know that you fall within the threshold of exemption. So you have to file your tax returns. If you can't prepare it yourself, get a professional to help you. You file it, and then it is through the tax returns that you claim exemption.
The new tax regime, the Act now introduces taxation of digital assets, and we know a couple of young people use digital assets a lot. So given the peculiar nature of digital assets, where ownership can sometimes be hidden, how do you see this being effectively enforced? And what mechanisms might the tax authorities use to track such transactions?
Interesting question. Very interesting question. And, you know, I totally agree with the challenges that you just identified. the enforcement of taxation of judicial assets can be quite problematic because, of the anonymity that more often than not characterizes such transactions. I think that there are a number of things that the tax authorities can do. The tax authorities can impose a reporting obligation or requirement on the people who offer these digital assets. Get them to file some kinds of returns. They may also require them to carry out detailed know your customer KYC diligence before onboarding people on their platform. And then, at the end of a period prescribed by the tax authorities, they may be required to file returns that will provide information as to what transactions have been done on their platform. But I expect that the FIRS, that will become the Nigerian Revenue Service, will issue some sort of guidelines to operationalize this aspect of taxation. But I agree with you that it's going to be quite challenging. But like I said, I expect that the tax authorities will come up with guidelines. What owners of the people who offer the digital assets to deduct the taxes that are payable at source. So for example, if you do a transaction on a crypto transaction and you earn a profit, while the owner of the exchange is taking out its own commission, it may be required to deduct tax at source and remit directly. So there are a number of things that the tax authorities can do, but I expect them to come out with, comprehensive guidelines on how to operationalize this.
Thank you. Please, can you scroll up? There's a last question that I want to take. Okay, no, something about NGO. I think I saw that. No, it's below. Okay, yes. How does this tax filing apply to NGOs or school associations that do not charge tax on membership fees? I guess that would also be school fees and registration fees.
So let's be clear. There is no, if you go to the relevant provisions of the tax laws, you will see profits that are exempt from tax. I hear a lot of people say, erroneously in my view, that once you're an NGO, you don't have liability to pay tax. That is not correct. Not long ago, I did a matter on behalf of the American International School in Lagos, where the tax authorities, imposed the taxes on surpluses that they recorded over a period of years. We went to the tax appeal tribunal to challenge that. And we did not make that challenge simply on the basis that it's a not-for-profit. We made that challenge because the relevant provisions of the law exempt profits of companies that are engaged in educational, ecclesiastical, and what's the other word now? It says ecclesiastical, educational activities of a public character from tax. So the argument we made was that the educational activities that the school was engaged in were of a public character, and that in any event, having been registered as incorporated trustees, any surpluses that they record are not distributed to the promoters of the school. And it was on that basis that the tax appeal tribunal agreed with us and set aside the assessment. So if you register a school and you earn a profit, and the profit is distributed among shareholders of the company, you don't have any tax exemption. You have to file tax returns like every other company and pay tax. But if you qualify for exemption, like I said earlier, the fact that you're qualified for exemption does not exempt you from filing obligations, because even one portion of your revenue may be exempt, but another portion may not. So let me use the example of the American International School. If they decided to set up a bus service, that will be carrying students, or even set up a transportation service, and they are earning income, they'll have to justify to the tax authority that that income, is not one that they should pay tax on, that it fits into the object of the school. So the point I make is that it is possible for an NGO some of whose activities are exempt from tax to also be involved in activities that are purely commercial in nature and therefore liable to tax. The only way to separate the two is by filing tax returns. So we must understand clearly that exemption from tax is not the same as exemption from filing obligations. And when you file your tax obligations, that's the only time you're able to engage the tax authority to demonstrate to them that what would appear to be revenue or profit or surplus on your part is actually exempt under certain provisions of the law.
Thank you, sir. Leonard, this is our last question. It says, can you further elaborate on house rents and taxes attached to it?
Okay, so there are no taxes attached to house rent, because when you're the person paying, if you're the person paying house rent, you're the one who is out of pocket. You're not earning any income. So there is no tax that you are required to pay. But the recipient of the rent is earning income and is required to pay tax on that income. But the point I made when I was making my presentation, I was trying to explain that under the current regime, right, there are certain allowances that you are allowed to claim before your personal income tax liability can be determined. That is the consolidated revenue allowance, which I said is the higher of the greater of 200,000 or 20% of your gross income, right? Now, that consolidated revenue allowance has been, consolidated relief allowance has been taken out under the new regime. The only exemption that you can claim for personal income tax purposes is the rent allowance. And the rent allowance is 20% of your rent. So if you're an employee and you live in a house where you pay rent of 1 million naira, before your employer can determine your personal income tax liability for the purposes of the deductions that are made from your salaries every month, they would have to take into account the 20% of your rent. But the maximum you can claim is 500,000. So if your rent, 20% of your rent is more than 500K, you can only claim 500,000 as allowance before your personal income tax liability can be determined. So what you need to know is, for PIT purposes, there's a rent allowance of 20% of your annual rent or 500,000, whichever is less. And that is deductible before the computation of your personal income tax liability. Now, you cannot claim this allowance if you own where you live. So it only applies to individuals who pay rent. If you own the house where you live, you can't claim this allowance, right? But if you own a house and you have tenants and they pay rent to you, you have an obligation to account for rent that you collect on on the house that you own.
To take us further, we'll be inviting Adetutu Adekoya ESQ. She's a senior colleague, a senior lawyer with over 2 decades. Please, let's appreciate her. Thank you, ma.
Thank you, everyone. Please, with a standing ovation and a clap, can we appreciate our moderator? We have to stand up. Let's appreciate. Have we been blessed with our session? Has it been impactful? Please, can we celebrate and appreciate him better? And also, to double on that, today is his birthday, so I have this assignment so that we appreciate him for a day like this. He took out time to come and talk to us, to impact us, to educate us. So can we sing this song? Happy birthday to you. I hope he can see us. To you.
Well, I can't see you, but I can hear you.
Okay, but he can hear us. Happy
Yes.
birthday to you.
Thank you very much.
May the good Lord bless you. 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 Hip, hip, hip. Hip, hip, hip. Hip, 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 hip. Thank you.
Thank you
Please,
very
you may
much.
be seated. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Mr.
Thank you.
Chukwuka, SAN. We were really blessed by your teachings and our exposure to the tax new reform. And my plea to everybody is that you should go back, get that, and so that you can know how to run your businesses and companies. One thing I can tell you I'm taking away from this is that every business, whether small or big, has to file their taxes. Without much ado, I would like to welcome our former chairman, MBA chairman, Abuja branch, Mr. Afam Okeke. Please come forward. Please come up. We would like to present a gift to Mr. Chukwuka, SAN. This is the gift. And so, that is it to show everybody. We really appreciate you, and we appreciate what you have done for us today. More grace and more blessings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Wow, wow, wow. What a session. Thank you very much, Leonard Silk. We have been greatly impacted by that session. All right. Something I believe that so many of us did not know before today is that the abbreviation NTA is not just for Nigerian Television Authority, but now we have the Nigerian Tax Act 2025, and it should be embedded in our minds that there are obligations left for every one of us to adhere to. All right. I believe there are perhaps some things that you might not know because you did not know that the SFG existed in church. Perhaps there were a few challenges or circumstances you did not know that you could have gotten help with, but now that you know, perhaps some would like to share with us a few of those challenges that if you had known that there was an SFG in church, you could have probably reached out before now. Can I get one or two? One or two persons. If you were aware that there was the SFG in church, perhaps you could have stepped up to any of the lawyers in church and approached us for a legal solution. All right. Should I take it that we are all literate and perhaps even have our personal lawyers. Is that it? Do we all have our personal lawyers? All right, but after this program, you will get your lawyer, I believe. All right, let's jump into our next session. We have with us really great speakers today who are going to be exposing us beyond our wildest imagination. I believe this first session was really impactful. And now you know that as a company, if you earn about just 50 million annual turnover, you're exempt from tax. All right. Our next speaker is the founder and principal of Everlaw Associates, a commercial law firm with offices in Abuja and Lagos, Nigeria. He's also a member of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, UK. He often brings a business objective-focused approach to commercial dispute resolution. All right, so in church, we had to conduct a survey to know exactly what are the needs of parishioners in House on the Rock and so many other persons. So he's going to be speaking to us about all these things and arbitration and other forms of amicable resolution. Please join me with a standing ovation. Welcome upstage, Mr. Max Ikongwe, as he takes his session. Please let's jam our hands together till he gets upstage. Thank you. Can we have the podium, please? Please come.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and good morning. It's a privilege to be here. I want to thank, first and foremost, the church leadership and, of course, the leadership of the lawyers special focus group for putting this together. I think it's very important because the Bible makes it clear to us that one of the core functions of the church is to equip the saints for the work of the ministry, and we are aware that the work of the ministry is not just what we do in church, but your business, what you do on Tuesday, what you do on Thursday as well. So I believe what this program would do for each of our businesses here is to equip you to better be able to carry on your business. So I have a presentation slide looking at some of the legal needs of parishioners from the survey that was conducted. So I'll be focusing on two key issues: alternative dispute resolution and intellectual property. Kindly move to the next slide, please. So here's a quick outline of some of the things we'll be looking at: an introduction, overview of the survey results. We'll look at a 360 ADR solution, what it is all about and how it can help you in your business. And then we'll look at intellectual property rights and a little case study of how important intellectual property right can be to a business. Next slide, please. So here's a little word cloud I did of the results from the survey that was conducted. So you can see a few words jump out at you immediately. Oh, okay, thank you, sir. Okay, thank you. But I hope I won't be blocking the view. Is this okay? This is okay. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so here's the result, just a few of the things that jumped out. Okay, this side. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. So yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, so these are a few of the words that jump out from the survey. So you can see a couple of things. We can see debt, we can see financial, landlord, tenant, and all that. But one of the biggest words there is matters. So what we can see overall is that most of these legal issues had already become disputes and they had become matters. So that's what I want to focus on. So the next slide, please. So the issue now is, what is the critical need for a lawyer generally? Now, in the last survey, we saw that most of the issues mentioned there were matters. So the question is, when you think about a lawyer, is this the first thing you think about? Somebody who is in court and is trying to resolve a dispute. Is that the first thing you think about? So I just want to draw your attention that there's a curative aspect. So like doctors, for instance, if you're already sick and you go to a doctor, he's trying to bring a cure. But there's also the preventive aspect where they stop you from ever getting to hospitals. So I just want to draw attention to the fact that lawyers do beyond this. They not only wait to resolve a dispute that has arisen, but that getting a lawyer on time means that you can prevent disputes. So I tell people personally in my practice, my greatest citation is the clients I have who have worked for over 10 years and they have never been to court, because we structure our transactions well on time and prevent ever getting to court. So I just want to encourage you that the need you have for a lawyer most critically is not to cure or to resolve your disputes, but to prevent disputes, in the first instance. Thank you very much, sir. So, of course, the last presentation has thrown a lot of light on taxation. So you do not find yourself looking for a lawyer to help you defend you in court when the taxman has already, Zacchaeus is already on you and has dragged you to court. So that actually is what you need a lawyer for, to prevent it from ever happening. So next slide, please. So why do we even need an alternative to litigation? Some of the headlines you see: disappointment, frustration, speedy justice delivery, heavy court dockets. These are the problems in court, and that is why alternative resolution actually is necessary. A former Chief Justice of Nigeria is officially on record to have testified before an arbitral tribunal in London, and his testimony was to the effect that the average length of time it takes to resolve a commercial dispute in Nigeria is how many years? Who can guess? How many years? How many? 10? 5? Not close. Not close. Somewhere around that region. 35 years is what a Chief Justice of Nigeria said is the average time to resolve a commercial dispute. Because if you run into trouble with your partners, for instance, you go to the High Court in the FCT, you get a judgment maybe in 2 years. You go to the Court of Appeal, Abuja Division, maybe it takes you another 4 years. That's 6 years. Currently, if you go to the Supreme Court, you'll be lucky if you get your judgment out in 17 years at the moment, except it's an election dispute. Those are the only disputes that seem to move fast at the moment. So this is why there's a need for an alternative to litigation as a way of resolving disputes. Move to the next slide, please. So, of course, like I mentioned, the idea is that the new face of law is to prevent disputes. But if disputes happen, then how can we resolve them in a way that, is quickest, most efficient, and effective? And, avoiding litigation, of course, is one. So there are many alternative dispute resolution methods. There are quite a lot of them. But I'm focusing only on two: mediation and arbitration. So mediation is a process where a neutral third party helps the disputants to reach a consensual resolution of their dispute. So this third party is essentially coming as a middleman to help both of you find a win-win solution to your problem. So you can see this is much better than litigation. In litigation, the judge is not concerned about a win-win approach. He's simply concerned about right and wrong. And of course, we all know when man fell in the Garden of Eden and started knowing about the knowledge of good and evil, all the trouble that has brought to us. So when you go before a judge, it's only concerned with who is good and who is evil. And of course, the judge is also not perfect. The system is not perfect. They ultimately might end up with a result that is not palatable to both parties. So you can go to court and get a judgment and not get justice. There are two different things. Getting a judgment and getting justice are two different things. But in mediation, the mediator is trying to help find what really is the core of the dispute and how can I help both parties reach a solution that everybody goes back satisfied. So it's like advanced negotiation. So negotiation is not far off it. Of course, we know that in the Bible, for instance, Paul was berating the Corinthians and asking them, how come you are going to the court of law? Don't you have any elders amongst you who can resolve your disputes? Why should a believer be taking another believer to the court of law? So that sort of mediation kind of is what he was saying there, that within the church itself, we should have, possible systems that are able to mediate. And I believe the SFG is actually here for you. That is one of the purposes. They can mediate. If you have a dispute with another person in church, you should be able to go there and find wise counsel that would, make both of you find a resolution that you might not need to even go as far as having a formal mediation. So in mediation, the neutral can suggest. He comes up with possible suggestions on ways to encourage, a settlement, but he cannot impose. So the duty of the mediator is not to find fault. who is at fault, but to find solution. How can we find a common ground that both of you want? So it could be possible you have a challenge with your business partner. You think your business partner is no longer committed to the business, and you want him out of the business. And perhaps what your business partner just wants is to have that recognition that he worked on this business. So the mediator can help you reach a solution that says, fine, he would leave the business, you pay him a certain amount of money off, but he is allowed to continue to put on his CV and on his public profile that he once worked with that company. So he can walk away happy. He has gotten what he wanted. You have also gotten what you wanted as well. So the outcome of a mediation is called a settlement agreement. And you can take that settlement agreement to the court, register it, and enforce it. Of course, that is the extreme. The idea being that when the parties consensually agreed to that settlement, you won't need any enforcement. Everybody would abide by the spirit of the agreement that they had reached because it is in everybody's best interest. So let's go to the next slide. So arbitration is also another alternative dispute resolution, but unlike mediation, it's a more formal process for resolving a dispute. It's similar to litigation. The difference is that in arbitration, it is operated privately by the party's own appointed expert, who is called the arbitrator. So if you go to court, for instance, your dispute will be resolved by a judge who is appointed and paid by the government. You have no say in the judge you get. If you file your case, the chief judge simply randomly looks in FCT, 66 judges of the FCT High Court, he picks any of them and he hands over your case to them. You have no say in who your judge is going to be, whether it's going to be a man, a woman, it's going to be tall, dark, and all that. You have no say in that. But in arbitration, the parties choose who would be the judge, and that's why I put it in quote, the judge over their case. So that way you can select somebody who understands the nature of your dispute. Because you can go to a judge, the judge knows nothing. We're talking about digital assets, for instance. You can go before a judge who knows nothing about technology, who finds it even difficult to put on a laptop. And then by the time you start telling him about cryptocurrency and all of that, you are as well speaking like Paul said in 1 Corinthians, I think 14 now, that when you're speaking tongues, you are to me a barbarian, and I'm also to you a barbarian. So the judge is just hearing gibberish. He's hearing you speak in tongues. He doesn't know what you're talking about. But in arbitration, you can select an arbitrator who is an expert in that industry. So therefore, he understands the language and the nature of your dispute. So of course, you can also design your arbitration for efficiency. You can agree that in this arbitration, we would only review documents. There should be no witness testimony. So that way, if your dispute, for instance, is maybe a shareholder agreement with your co-founder, you simply take that and along with the letters and the email correspondences and just tell the arbitrator, all we want for you is to read the correspondences before us, hear our arguments, and make a final decision. You can design it, but in court, you do not have that flexibility to design how your dispute will be resolved. And of course, you are designing it because you want to make it efficient in terms of maybe time or in terms of cost. That is part of the advantages of using arbitration. But however, note that arbitration might likely be more pricey than litigation. Because in litigation, the judge is paid by the government. But in arbitration, you have to pay him because the arbitrator, sits as a private party. Both parties would have to come up with the money to pay for the arbitrator. So it can be slightly more expensive, but sometimes the efficiency you gain would offset that additional expense. And of course, litigation might only look cheap, but because it takes 30 years, imagine paying a lawyer for 30 years. Ultimately, the price will catch up and far outstrip the price for arbitration. But also you have to be careful when using low value, when you want to take low value transactions to arbitration. I've seen a scenario where in the landlord tenancy agreement, the rent was just about 2 million naira. And there was a clause there that says any dispute should be resolved by arbitration under the Arbitration and Conciliation Act. So the Arbitration and Conciliation Act is the old law regulating arbitration in Nigeria. Under that law, if you do not specify who the arbitrators should be and how they will be appointed, then by default, 3 arbitrators will be appointed. So you can imagine if it's a dispute of 2 million naira, I can't think of any arbitrator who would want to, for an arbitration, charge less than 1.5 million naira. So if you have 3 arbitrators and the dispute is 2 million and they each charge even 1 million naira, you're already paying 3 million naira to arbitrators. So that is why for low value transactions, be careful about using arbitration. It might be better for you to use mediation. I also encourage people, one of the cheaper ways to get arbitration is to use the court-connected arbitral institutions. One of them is the Abuja multi-door courthouse. They are relatively cheaper to use for arbitration. So in low-value transactions, you might want to use that kind of arbitration institution. But I mean, for high-value arbitrations that have international elements, you might want to use one of the more international focused arbitration institutions. So, of course, the outcome of arbitration is a binding award. It's just like a judgment. The arbitrator also does the right or wrong equation and gives a final award. He's not concerned with trying to beg you or trying to propose a win-win solution. He also gives you a binding award, which you can take to court and enforce in court. One of the sad realities in Nigeria is that after you finish your arbitration, you could have finished your arbitration in 18 months. But unfortunately, when you take that award to court to enforce, sometimes that can become another battle that will go from the High Court to the Court of Appeal to the Supreme Court and take another 15, 20 years. That is one of the sad realities. But the new arbitration law we have has tried to ring fence and stop that kind of abuse of the process. So for high-value commercial transactions, I encourage you, always ask to ensure that in your contract that an arbitration clause is included. If it's a lower-level transaction, you can put a mediation clause. Sometimes you can have a hybrid. You can say, let's try mediation first. If it doesn't work after 45, 60, or 90 days, then we can move on to arbitration. So the good thing is that you have all the leeway, and that is why we say when you have a lawyer who understands the preventive part of justice, he would be able to advise you on all of this and see the best way to design your agreement to ensure that you do not fall into disputes. Next slide, please. So I think that's that for ADR. So we'll quickly look at intellectual property before my time runs out. How am I doing for time? I don't know if anybody can give me a prompt. 15 more minutes. Okay, good. So that I'm halfway. Thank you. So intellectual property is one of the things I saw in the survey, and I think it's very important. The reason why I think intellectual property is important is that for creative people, and I mean, we are believers, we have the Holy Spirit in us. That's, the epitome of the creative force of God. So if we have him within us, we are all creative people. As a creative person, when you produce products or services born of your creativity, the only way you can protect them is through the law of intellectual property. So we have physical, tangible property. So as we are all seated here, each of us would have one or two physical, tangible property. So I have a phone, for instance. That is a physical, tangible property. We need to understand that property, as conceived by law, is something that gives you benefits. So this phone, for instance, is my physical phone. It gives me benefit. I can make calls with it. I can connect to my social media. If you want to use my phone, then you need my permission to use it. Same thing with my laptop. Same thing with my car. Now, but there are also other kinds of property you own that are not physical, that you cannot hold with your hands. That if somebody uses without your permission, you will feel cheated. So, for instance, a typical example, if you run a business here, is the name of your business. If somebody takes the name of your business, then that person can actually end up stealing value that should have come to you. So you can see that the name of your business is not something physical or tangible. You can't lock it in an office safe, but you need to protect it somehow. So that is part of what intellectual property does for you. It helps you protect intangible assets that you own. And for a business that does not understand and appreciate and protect its intellectual property, you are like a person who is walking with only one leg. Because a practical example is Coca-Cola. We all know Coca-Cola. The company that used to produce Coca-Cola in Nigeria before now is called Nigerian Bottling Company. Nigerian Bottling Company has a lot of physical assets. They have big factories. One of them is in Idu. Big factories. They have trucks that move their drinks all over the country and all of that. But the value of that company is not in all those physical things. If the word Coca-Cola is taken away from them and they can no longer use that word Coca-Cola to put on bottles of soft drinks, they would lose a lot of value. So there are many companies that their intellectual asset, the brand presence of their name, is much more valuable than all their physical assets put together. So even if all their physical asset gets burnt, so far as they still have that name and that goodwill, once they put out their product, they would immediately gain value back. So I hope we all understand the importance of intellectual property and why it's important to protect it. Next slide, please. So this is essentially what I've just explained. Next slide, please. So there are different types of intellectual property, and different categories of them. we'll be looking at the 4 principal types of intellectual property. And we'll also look at the kinds of people or industries or businesses that they apply to. The first one is called copyright. I'm sure we have all heard the word copyright. And the word seems quite explanatory, that if you must copy, then you must copy in the right way. That's just a very colloquial way to explain what copyright means. So it means that if I've created a work, nobody should be able to copy that work without my permission. That's just a simple way to say what copyright means. So copyright itself covers 6 categories of works. Number 1 is literary works, written things, books, novels, and all of that. That's literary works. Musical works. Musical works here, we have to distinguish it from sound recordings. So music here is not just about what you hear in the ear, but it's the melody, the composition of music that makes it pleasurable to hear. So that musical composition is also protected. So if I come up with a unique melody, you cannot simply take my melody and put it in your movie or to promote your company's business without my permission. Then it also involves artistic works, photographs, sculptures, paintings, drawings, and all of that are artistic works. So if I draw or I take a picture, you cannot take that picture and use it without my permission. Sound recordings, I already mentioned this. Any type of sound recording, audible to the ear. So it could even be that I just take my phone and record cars driving past on the road. I have now the copyright to that. Nobody can use that sound without my permission. I mean, of course, you can take your own phone and also record the same thing, and that becomes your own copyright as well. Then it also involves audiovisual or videos. Simple. So videos is sound plus image, moving sound plus image, and then also broadcast rights. So the practical example of broadcast rights is that most football clubs make more money from their broadcast rights than they make from selling tickets. It's simple to calculate. How many people can fit into Old Trafford? Man U fans, or they are afraid to show themselves? No Man U fan in the house. God help Manchester United. Okay, Liverpool, are they in the house? Chelsea. Okay, so how many people can fit into Stamford Bridge? 35,000, 40,000 people. Exactly, but how many people can watch a Chelsea match via broadcast satellite signal? Over 1 billion. So you can see that if there was no intellectual property right to protect the right to broadcast a Chelsea football match, anybody can go into the stadium, set up his own camera and broadcast, and Chelsea will lose a lot of revenue. But what copyright law does for them is that it limits the only people who can broadcast that right need to enter into an agreement with Chelsea and pay them a certain amount for the right to broadcast. So I hope you can see how practically this works and how important this can be to your business. So it can protect everything from books, music, computer programs, artistic work, pictures, videos. Now, a very interesting thing you need to note about copyright law is that the owner of copyright is the person who made the work. So if you pay somebody to cover your wedding ceremony, he is the owner of the copyright in those pictures. You are not the owner of the copyright in those pictures. So you cannot take the picture, for instance, and sell them to a TV station or to an advert agency to use for advert without the permission of a photographer. He can sue you for that. Because even though you are the subject of the picture and you paid him for it, he owns the copyright in it. Same thing also when you commission somebody to design a website for you. He owns the copyright in that website. Do you understand that? So the only way to solve that is that when you commission somebody to do any creative work for you, have a written agreement that says any creative work coming out of this, the person transfers all his copyright in that work to you so that you become the owner after having paid for it. So, these are little banana peels that can be a problem. Another dangerous one is that the person who designs your company logo, and we're going to come to logo because logo is registered as a trademark, also owns the copyright in that logo and can control how you use that logo. So these are little things that are important in your business, and that is why it's always good, even if it's just an email documentation. I'm paying you 150,000 naira to design a logo for me, and you hereby confirm that once that logo is designed, I have full copyright and all intellectual property rights in that logo. So these are little things, but you need to take note of them. So copyright is protected automatically from when it is created and fixated. Fixated just simply means once you put it into a form. If it's a book, once you write it down, if it's music, once you record it, automatically it is protected. You don't have to register before you enjoy the protection. However, there's a voluntary deposit scheme run by the Nigerian Copyright Commission that allows you to get, a document that just shows when the work was created. So it can be a way to prove your ownership of that work if you need to go to court for that purpose. So copyright protection lasts for the lifetime of the author, the person who created the work, and 70 years after he has died. So it means that his family, his heirs, can continue to enjoy the benefit of that copyright. So for instance, Chinua Achebe, I think, died in 2012. So it means that copyright in Things Fall Apart would last until 2082. It means you cannot pick Things Fall Apart now and say, because Chinua Achebe is dead, I can now copy the work, make photocopies and start selling, and all that. His children can, and his estate can sue you for that. But if the work was created by a company, then the copyright only lasts for 50 years. So that's why we also advise people for startups, when you write your codes, to ensure that you have a longer copyright protection, you can ensure that you put the copyright in your personal name before you transfer it to your company. But if you put that copyright as created by your company, then you have only 50 years. But if you take it in your personal name, transfer to your company, then you have your lifetime plus 70 years after you have died. So copyright as a protection is relevant to musicians, to writers, to artists, to video and photographers, to software designers as well. So next slide. So the next type of intellectual, so I hope we have all gotten copyright. Copyright is about creative expression, protecting your creative expression. I would say there are 6 types of creative expressions protected by copyright. Now, trademark is a different type of intellectual property right that protects your identity in the marketplace. So your identity could be your name, it could be your logo, it could also be simple words. So I'm sure we all here know that there are certain words, if you hear, you immediately understand that this product I'm seeing is coming from a particular company. So if I wear a t-shirt with the words, "Just do it," written on it, what will you think about that shirt? Nike, exactly. So it means that is how you can, so that word functions as a trademark. It helps to put the brand there in the market. That's how you are able to distinguish between what product you are looking for and also to discriminate in terms of quality of product. So it means that if I hold up a phone and it has a logo of something that looks round and then with a cut in it, that's Apple, right? So it means if I bring that phone to you and I tell you it's 4 million, you would buy. But if I bring the same phone and that logo is not there, you say, no, this is not Apple. You will not be willing to pay 4 million. So you can see the important function that a trademark serves. It helps to communicate who the producer of a particular product or service is. So, of course, the symbol you see there in circle, R in circle, is just a way of letting you know that a word or a logo you are looking at is a registered trademark. So it's not compulsory in Nigeria at least, but it's good to use it just to let people know that the service or the product in question is registered as a trademark. So trademark covers 45 internationally recognized classes. What that simply means is that if I register Apple for products that include technology services and products, laptops, phones, and all of that, it does not mean that if somebody else is now doing, maybe bottled water and now calls it Apple bottled water, that Apple company can sue him. Essentially, the 45 classes are grouped together. So what we are simply saying is that the government is only giving you a monopoly that nobody else should be able to use that trademark or that word for goods or services that are similar to the one that you are producing. So there are 45 different categories in which you can register your trademark. So it's important that when you have your business, you understand exactly what category it falls into and register the trademark. And sometimes you might have to register in more than 2 or 3 classes because your product or service cuts across many different classes. So the trademark lasts for 7 years after you register it. That's your protection. Is valid for 7 years in the first instance. And then you can renew it non-stop for blocks of 14 years. So it can last actually forever. Unlike copyright that lasts and has a terminal date, your trademark can last forever so far as you continue to pay and renew the registration. So a trademark is relevant to merchants, people who provide service providers. So, I run a law firm, for instance, so I can register my logo or my name of my law firm as a trademark to ensure that nobody else uses that name or that logo to deceive the general public and pretend that, the service offering is coming from my law firm. Also from businesses that are brand-intensive businesses, so businesses that depend on branding, fashion, and all of that. Also, you need a trademark. So in all of this, I hope you can see that the same business needs copyright and also need trademark for different types of products and services. Next slide, please. Then patents is the third type of intellectual property. So a patent essentially is a 20 years monopoly that the government gives to you for coming up with an invention to prevent anybody else from using that invention to produce goods or services. So the idea is that an invention is a solution, a new solution to a technical challenge. The life of man on earth is always about overcoming challenges. So for instance, we are in this hall this morning to make this event pleasurable. There are certain technical challenges that we have needed to overcome to make this event good. Who can give me an example of one technical challenge as we are in this hall now? So one of them, for instance, is about hearing me. If we do not have a microphone, can you hear me? So that's a technical challenge, projecting my voice. So the microphone is an invention that was created to solve that technical challenge of making one more audible over a large expanse of people. So that's what an invention is all about. When you think and come up with a unique way to solve a current technical challenge faced in a particular industry, then the government will reward you by giving you a monopoly and say nobody else should be allowed to use that invention. The reason is to encourage you to spend more time developing new inventions. The reason also is to ensure that if you are taking loans while you are developing and doing testing and experimenting and all of that, you are able to make enough money in that 20 years when you are the only person offering that goods or services to be able to pay back. Then after 20 years, anybody can actually take that invention and use it for the good and the betterment of society as a whole. So, of course, the invention could be an entirely new solution. Sometimes it could be an improvement on an existing solution. So one improvement was microphone, for instance. I can have a handheld mic. But if I was acting and I needed to use my hands, and it was not, wouldn't be proper for me to hold the microphone in my hands, the lapel mic is an improvement on an existing invention. So in some countries, the business people do is simply to go to their patent registry, pick up patents, and find a way to improve on it. Do you understand that? So that can become for you a business model, to just improve on existing inventions and make them more efficient, make them, maybe sometimes customize them to the environment, the warmer climate of Nigeria, for instance. So your patent is valid for 20 years, but you must renew it annually for that 20 years. Now, the danger with patent is that if you come up with an invention and you have not registered it, the moment you release it to the public, you lose the right to register it. So you can be excited and say, oh, there's something new, like Joseph told his brothers, I had a dream, and you start quickly telling them, that is risky. If it's a patent, you have to protect it before you begin to share it with people. Sometimes, for startups, you have an invention, you need some more money to do further experimentation and proof of concept. You now go to an uncle or to a third party to ask for funds. So the safe way to do that is to ensure that when you go to a third party, make them sign a non-disclosure agreement to ensure that you do not lose the right to subsequently register your patent. Because we mentioned that with copyright, you do not have to register to enjoy the protection. With trademark, you have to register to enjoy the protection, but it's not mandatory. There are other ways to do it. But with patent, you must register before you enjoy the protection. So it's a warning that with patents, you must, before releasing any versions to the public, ensure that you have registered your patent. So patent, of course, is relevant to inventors, to technicians, to people who, of course, come up with creative solutions. But you can see the difference between patent and copyright. Copyright is about creativity, expressions of creativity. But patent is about inventions, solving technical challenges. That's where the difference lies in both types of intellectual property. Next slide, please. I know I'm beginning to run low on time. So designs also is another type of intellectual property. So if you have an eye-catchy design, there are different functions. When you look at a device, for instance, like this laptop, the laptop on its own has a function. It helps you to run programs and all. But you see the way the laptop is designed. There are some features that just make it look attractive. The way the logo has, like a reflective background behind it. It makes it more pleasing to the eye, the color, the shape, and all of that. So there are times when you create a product and beyond the functionality of the product, there's the eye-catching features you put in a product to make it more attractive to people. So also you can get protection for that. Because if you do not do that, it means anybody else can do his own laptop. He will not exactly steal my name in terms of infringing on my trademark, but he makes it look exactly like my own. So for ladies, for instance, when you walk into a shop, the chances are that you buy a shampoo because the packaging looks nice, even if the product inside is not as nice as that of another shampoo. But the attractiveness of the packaging itself is an economic benefit. So that is what designs protects. Also, of course, fashion. If you go to buy a shoe, you look at 2 or 3 different shoes. The one that looks more catchy is the one you end up buying. So if anybody is allowed to steal your design of a shoe and also use it, then it means he's essentially stealing, potential customers that would have come to you. So that's what industrial design is all about. The protection lasts for a total of 15 years. Of course, you have to continue renewing it. Like patents as well, you must register it before you release it to the public. Next slide. Yeah, thank you. So this is just a small case study of, we all know Yeezy sneakers by Kanye West and Adidas. Of course, the relationship has fallen apart now. But this was a fashion collaboration between Adidas and Kanye West. Yeezy, when he was in his heyday, generated over $2 billion in annual sales for Adidas, making up around 10% of the brand's total revenue at its height. Just that sneakers alone. But of course, it got cancelled due to Kanye West's anti-Semitic comments. The value of the collaboration really was the fact that Kanye West owned the trademark Yeezy, and he licensed it to Adidas to make shoes and put that trademark on it and sell the shoes. And of course, his personality as well was also part of the brand packaging. So to tell you the value of that trademark alone, the fact that Adidas stopped using that trademark alone, Kanye West lost net worth of $1.5 billion. So you can see that beyond the physical factories that make the shoe owned by Adidas, just that trademark alone is valued at over $1.5 billion. This is just to show you the value of IP and why you need to go back and think in your own business and see what are the intellectual property assets that my business owns and how am I leveraging them to ensure that I'm getting the most out of them. So I believe that brings us to the end of the presentation. So thank you for being a wonderful audience.
Thank you so much, Mr. Max. Thank you. Before you go, I'm just going to welcome our former chairman of MBA Abuja branch. Please, sir, you help us to present a gift to Mr. Max. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
So on behalf of the lawyers SFG, it's an honor and privilege to make this presentation to a dear colleague, brother, and friend, Max Ikombe, Esquire, in whom we are well pleased. May God continue to bless you, and may you continue to do exploits.
Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Max. Thank you. So are we living up to the promise we made in the beginning? Are we living up to it? Okay. Thank you. I'm glad you're having a wonderful time. And so we're just going to move speedily into the next session. I mean, from this session, we've taken the fact that we have to start thinking preventively when we are engaging lawyers, right? We have to start thinking of getting lawyers involved before we get into trouble. And now we're going to be going into another aspect of our conversation. So I want us to just think about something. Think about the last time you entered into a business relationship over a handshake or a mutual understanding between the parties, or simply because you like the person's vibes. I mean, young people talk about vibes a lot. You just like the way the person makes you feel, and you entered into a business relationship with this person. So what happens when that business relationship falls apart? What happens when you encounter a misunderstanding? What do you do? Or think about another time when you had an opportunity to participate in a competition or to bid for a project, and you had an issue with structure. They required that every business that is to submit their tender is supposed to have certain structure, and you did not have that structure. So our next speaker is going to be talking to us about contracts and regulatory compliance, which is another word for structure for businesses. So let's just get ready as we receive our next speaker. I'm going to read his bio quickly. He is the managing associate at a litigation, corporate, and commercial consultancy firm, and has served as legal counsel to several individuals, corporate entities, and government parastatals. With a warm round of applause, let us put our hands together and welcome Mr. Abiodun Olutekunbi for the next session. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning, church. Okay, hope we're together. I'm sure my work here has been made lighter with the first presentation. Before I proceed, I have a very short time to make my presentation. Kindly indulge me to acknowledge the leadership of the church for creating this opportunity and avenue for us to get to interact. And also permit me to also appreciate the coordinator of the Lawyers Specialized Focus Group, Mr. Dominic, for this great program we are having, an interesting time. And so I'm moving quickly into discussions generally on business laws, contracts, and regulatory compliance. And it is good for us to note that this session affects us either as entrepreneurs or individual business owners, companies, managing directors, or what have you. There is a saying, general saying, that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a step. So probably you are a civil servant at this point in time, you are a farmer, you are an artisan, or whatever your endeavors or vocation is. I want you to know that we live in the business world, and there is virtually nothing you can do without, one way or the other, having the relevancies of this business or contract and the regulatory compliance to our daily affairs. I'm sure you agree with me. Some of us, we came here to our church this morning with probably through a booking boat ride. What you have there is a transaction that is already going on, and that is known as a contractual relationship. So, critically or briefly, it's good for us to know that there are laws that generally regulate how business transactions are conducted in Nigeria, and it is often said that ignorance of the law should be no excuse. So, this law regulates how a company, for instance, or a business is set up and how it is managed. And the contract basically revolves around agreements between two or more parties that spells out their duties, obligations to do a thing or not to do a thing in a particular way or in a specified way, while general contracts refers to how business entities coordinate their transactions and general merchandise. Now, regulatory compliance has to do with the irreducible minima or expectations that has been set by law as to how a business operation is conducted. And it is good to note or to point out that when there is a breach in this law or regulations, there is also oftentimes penalties that are imposed by law. I'm sure you've heard this morning from the learned SAN when he was presenting on the issue of tax, which is part of the core mandate of compliance that is required of every company and business owners operating, and even individuals in Nigeria. And he has told us that you've been informed about the penalties that accrue when we fail to, comply with some of these requirements of law. And I would like to point out that there are specific agencies of government that regulate each business operations. And this range from the first start or the commencement of this regulatory compliance has to do with the Corporate Affairs Commission. You recall about 2 years ago or 3 years ago, we have so many companies in Nigeria that have been operating without compliance with the filing of annual returns. And if you own a business, you will agree or understand that I think it was actually a bumper harvest time for lawyers. I'm seeing my brother there, nodding his head. I'm sure you understand what I'm saying, because why? So many businesses have been operating for up to 15, 20 years, 30 years, and you would not, you will not believe it that not for once have they paid the annual returns. And it is also ironical that some of these business owners are not even aware. And I'm aware of some client that got to me and said, but I'm not aware that I'm supposed to be paying annual returns or filing annual returns with the CAC. So what happened is that we are in the technology age, and the world is evolving. So the more the world is evolving, also the government is also looking at ingenious ways at getting its dues and compliances fulfilled by business owners. So what happened? Now on CAC portal, you now have either your company can be either active or inactive. So once you go on a public search, you'll be able to discover the status of your company. And once your company is inactive, I'm sure it's as good as you knowing that automatically you cannot transact. It's as good as the company is dormant. And if the company becomes dormant for a very long period of time, automatically the company can be deleted from the portal and cease to exist as a corporate entity. So some of these regulatory compliance are not limited to, you have the Central Bank of Nigeria if you have to do deals on forex tradings. We have the stock exchange market. You have Nigerian Communications Act, and so many types of, so many kinds of this regulatory compliance. Time will not avail us to run through some of them. Now, I would like to say that generally we need to start paying attention to the concept and the intention of what contract is all about. Because why? Our knowledge of contract will assist us to either maximize profit or run into a loss. And I need to quickly point out here that oftentimes than not, as a litigation and corporate lawyer, I observe that most difficulties or most challenges that result into litigations are avoidable mistakes and errors. So for your contract to be valid in law, there are general expectations under the law. And part of the expectations are there must be offer and acceptance. Now, offer and acceptance means that if you've not been if an offer has not been made for you to carry out an obligation, and you just heard that there was a land transaction that came up few weeks back, and a company was engaged by another company to serve as an agent and a consultant. So the company that was engaged reached out to some of his friends to be able to get their buy-in if they have the land specification that he was looking for. And they said, yes, they had. So they pushed it and everything, and at the end of the day, the matter is before the court currently. What happened? No offer was actually made. It was just more like a friendship discussion, just like maybe someone just approached you and told you that, oh, I needed this idea. And at the end of the day, he was paid for that services. And you are now coming, you now want to make a claim that, oh, since he has been paid, you need to partake in that, what's it called, payment or consideration that has been furnished for that contract. The question is, was the offer made to you? Was there an acceptance by you? So it means that you cannot just jump at opportunity. When you jump at opportunity, at the end of the day, you have nothing to hold on to. So there must be offer and acceptance. There must be consideration. So every consideration means what is the output or outcome? If I do this, X, Y, Z, what will be the consideration for the services I'm rendering? You also have legal capacity. The legal capacity under law means that you cannot transact, for instance, with a mad person. You cannot transact, for instance, with a minor. So it means, let's say you are a boat driver and you just saw there was this very young boy here that's curious, that was asking questions the other time. I think he should be about 8, 9. And he said, I'm going to House on the Rock. And you decide to pick him. If he gets to the church gate and drops him and he said, I don't have money to pay, I'm sure you may not have something justifiable on that law. Why? Because he's a minor. And before you transact with him, you must be circumspect. You must pay attention to the fact that this boy looks a very young boy. And then again, you must know that the contract has to be for lawful purpose, and also there has to be mutual consent. In law of contract, we call it consensus ad idem. There must be the meeting of the mind. Our mindset must be on the same in respect of entering into contract. Now, we have common examples of contract that we generally refer to, and some of these are highlighted. We have business contracts, or employment contract. Some of us were employers of labor. We know there has to be a standard form of contract which spells out roles, duties, and obligations of parties. We also have sales and service contract. Under the sales and service contract, you could also have retainership. I'm not unmindful that I could be talking to some professionals in-house, architects, engineers, and others. So you could have a retainership agreement. You could have a service delivery agreement. Probably you are into maybe an entrepreneurial aspect, whether cooking, whatsoever, artisanship or photography and all of that. So these are service agreements, and there has to be a clear definitions as to the intent you propose. We also have what we call partnership agreement, and we have also lease and tenancy agreement. My brother here, Godfrey, will be discussing more on tenancy agreement. I'm sure you also know that sometimes we enter into relationship and courting, dating, and all of that. Do you also know that even when you start dating someone, you are into a contractual agreement? And when there is a breach of this obligation, I'm sure some have been jilted in one way or the other. Do you know that there is a accruable right? If you promise to marry someone and eventually you fail, and either of the party, after you have met the parents, you have met either party, you have already created an agreement, a contractual relationship, and it is justiciable. It's something you can enforce in a court of law. Anyway, my brother has already hinted that we are in a church and we should not go into litigations. But you know, some break relationship is oftentimes very fatal. I'm a witness to that, not personally, but it happened to my sister, and you know, it's not something palatable. So when you have some of these things, escalate it to the lawyers, SGF, and we'll look at what we can do. Yes, we'll pray, we'll do all of that for you, but we can also, you know, do some little, you know, okay, I'm sure you understand what I'm saying. Okay, so now, why do you need a legal counsel in all of your contractual obligations? This is where it gets interesting. Oftentimes than not, I know people don't want to pay lawyers. Because we don't want to pay for lawyers, thank God we're also in the age of artificial intelligence. You just go to the internet, download an agreement, give it to the other party, and you sign. This could be fatal and could be destructive. Now, what is this supposed to be? You need a lawyer to make a tailor-made agreement for you. Now, the AI that you have adopted verbatim, the template for your tenancy agreement or for your service agreement or for your retainership agreement, does not know your peculiar need. It's not also aware of peculiar circumstances that surround contractual formations in Nigeria. I'll give you an example of a JV joint ventures agreements I reviewed last year for a company. Now, there was this company that was engaged in a partnership agreement, and now, unfortunately, the company was not having the resources to finance the project. So it has to get a third party involved in the transaction, which is now bringing in a party who is going to serve as a project financier. So from a JV, the company now moves into a project financial agreement with a third party. Now, there are what we call fundamental terms of contract. And a breach of these fundamental terms of contract automatically brings liabilities on your part as a defaulting party. So what happened? I looked at the primary agreement, that is the JV, the joint venture, and I discovered that it provides explicitly that there has to be a written consent before any power that is donated to the party can be contracted to another party. That is first. Secondly, in order to protect the interests of the client that engaged my services, I also observed that if this company that is looking for a financier finds it so easy, why not go and get the finance, the resources needed from a bank? So he could not do it through a bank. Now, eventually, to cut the long story short, I was able to build in a clause that all the roles and responsibility that accrue to this party should automatically devolve to the project financier. Why? Because they need to protect their finance. They need to protect their money. And this is part of the ingenuities you have a lawyer bringing in. No sooner than we concluded the transaction, that we discovered that the party that brought the transaction is just a very cantankerous individual. And if not for the saving grace that the property was well documented, your guess is as good as mine that the financial commitment of the project financial would have gone down the drain. So my brother talked about curative and preventive measure. So when you get a lawyer involved in your transaction, you are invariably preventing yourself from, hazard that may stand to, be detrimental to your business interests. Now, I would just also want to highlight that there are very, very important clauses that you should look out for when you are drafting, when you are looking at your contractual document. And, many entrepreneurs, oftentimes than not, we just focus on the money. We focus on the money we stand to gain. And you discover that because you fail to cross the T and dot the I properly, oftentimes than not, you see the promised land, but you cannot get there. And that is very, very worrisome for us as lawyers. And still taking it off from Mr. Ikungbe's position, I think if we properly manage our business relationship and contractual relationship very well, courts, arbitrations, mediations are avoidable. I met a client sometimes around 2017, and it was not the best of time. But I can say that by the grace of God today, it's all smile. Not in terms of making money, but in the past, 4 years back now, we've not had any reason to go to court. Why? Because we scrutinize every agreement very well, we scrutinize every business opportunity very well, and we prevent there are transactions that we can go into, and there are transactions that you cannot go into. Why do you need a lawyer in this respect? I'll give you another example. There was a property that was to be sold, and the property was purchased in the name of a bureau de change. Somebody gave his money to bureau de change, and he purchased the property from a property developer, one of the renowned property developers in town. And now he wants to sell the property, and my client wanted to purchase the property about 350 million naira. Now, upon conducting a search, some of us will just say, "Oh, good opportunity, 350 million naira. I stand to gain about 600 million by the time I take over the property." That is not the way out. We were conducting a search, and even before moving to the advanced stage of the search, we discovered that the person that claimed to be the owner of the property his name was not on the letter of allocation. So now, but we discovered that there was an application made to the developer that for the transfer of the interest to the rightful owner. It was never done. So imagine you proceed and make a purchase of that property without conducting a search. This same bureau de change will come tomorrow and tell you that I'm the owner of that property. And in law, what do you look at? Yeah? Document. Document, the facts speak for itself, and documents, take precedence over your oral explanations and all of that. So please, we need to be very careful of this. Then another thing I think we need to be careful of is we need to be careful of clarity. There has to be clarity in our contractual document and relationship, clarity of intention. Now, you can imagine when you say a transaction is to be conducted promptly, or a transaction is to be conducted within 14 days. Which one do you think is more appropriate? Yeah? 14 days. Yes, because what is prompt to you may not be prompt to me. And I have a case that is ongoing before the FCT High Court. What happened? A right of first refusal was given to a tenant in residence to purchase the property in Kubwa, about 4.5 million naira at that time. And what happened? The offer letter says is to make the payment promptly, and promptly turned to more than a year before the payment could be concluded. Now, there was novation, rewritten of the agreement. Let's not go into all those technicalities. But at the end of the day, the landowner is now saying he wants to convert the money that has been paid to tenancy, and then we are now saying, can you convert an intention that was already expressed in offer and acceptance into a tenancy? So these are the reasons why you need a lawyer and you need clarity of intention for your destiny. Now, I will not bore us with basic regulatory compliance that we need to comply with as business owners and entrepreneurs because of time, but because some of the aspect has already been taken. But let it be known that once you incorporate your company, within the first 18 months, you enjoy what we call more like moratorium period that you don't need to file annual returns. Okay. So, but subsequently, you will need to, after the first 18 months, every year you need to file your annual returns. And then we also talk about compliance with companies' income tax. This has already been taken care of, and I will move to my conclusion now. My conclusion says one of the core values of House on the Rock, the refuge, is excellence. Being born again gives you a comparative advantage in the marketplace as we serve as light to the world and a city set on the hill. Are you a business owner, CEO, or thinking of starting your own business? Are you satisfied with your business or company current structure? Are you in dilemma on how to float your company, business, or businesses is your business or company bedeviled with various pieces of downturns, bankruptcy, litigation, penalties, image conflict, etc.? Change is inevitable. According to Winston Churchill, success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that can't. Thank you for your audience. I wish you the best of luck in your business and contractual obligations. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Abiodun. Such an insightful session. Please let's jam our hands together for him again. Thank you. Please note that you can continue to send in your questions to the QR code to be displayed on the screen. And also take note that there is lunch after this session, so please let's wait behind to take our lunch is already prepared for you. So you just take your package after this session. All right, like Mr. Abiodun rightly said, flowing from what he said, it's not all contracts that needs to be explicitly stated in a document, particularly for some of you that probably have been involved in some contractual relationship, as he has explained, and you have made the mistake of not detailing these out in a document. Please note that there are still remedies. As far as the elements of contracts, there are some things we call the basic elements of contract, which he mentioned: offer, there is acceptance, and consideration was furnished. It simply means that money was paid. So it means the elements of contract are complete. And as far as these elements are complete, you will have a right to a remedy before any court of law. So please note that your rights have not been totally foreclosed, and there are still things that can be done in relation to that. All right, moving quickly into our final session, we'll be discussing the topics on real estate, tenancy and recovery of possession of premises, property conveyancing and real estate development and investment. And to take us in this session, we have our next speaker, who is a seasoned legal practitioner with over a decade of professional experience. He specializes in real estate, corporate and commercial law, with extensive expertise in managing large-scale real estate transactions, drafting, registration, contract negotiation, regulatory compliance, and complex commercial transactions. I invite you to pay extra attention to this particular session because I believe it involves every one of us. Either you're a landlord or you pay rent in someone's house. Please join me with a clapping ovation as we welcome upstage Mr. Hotr Abuja. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ralph. Good morning, church. Good morning, our guests. It's a privilege to be standing before you to present some thoughts on the topic as introduced by Mr. Ralph. I thank especially the leadership of the church and leadership of the SFG for giving me the opportunity to do this. So we'll be talking majorly, briefly, on the rudimental points in tenancy and real estate development in Nigeria. My thoughts would be, or my presentation will be segmented into two. The first segment will deal with tenancy matters generally. We'll be exploring, my introduction, please. We'll be exploring the legal framework governing tenancy, the rights and obligations of landlords and tenants alike, recovery of premises, what it entails, challenges associated with enforcing tenancy laws. That's on the tenancy part. And also we'll be talking about the real estate parts. What are the types of real estate properties that are there? What are types of structures and ownership? What are the pitfalls to avoid? And like my very good friend, my guy here said that he's planning to become a landlord. So what are the things you should look out for? So diving straight to it, I'd like you to know that we won't go too deeply into details because of time. But fortunately, there is a Q&A session afterwards. So all the questions you have from the very first session till the last session, please continue, keep sending them there. We'll take our time to answer all of them. And even if we are not able to answer all of them, subsequently after the meeting at the legal aid desk outside the hall, we'll have lawyers there to attend to you. And subsequently on Sundays, for members of House on the Rock, can always visit us at legal aid desk to answer whatever issues or questions you have. Thank you. So diving straight into it, tenancy. So what are the laws that regulate tenancy in Nigeria? We have the Land Use Act, which is a law that regulates all lands in Nigeria. We have the tenancy laws of each state. In the FCT, we have the Recovery of Premises Act. And then we have contract laws and then customs and traditions of the local places. Now, the contract law is important here because like the last speaker said, the relationship between a tenant and a landlord is a contract. So it's always very important to note that you and your landlord are into a contract. Therefore, you should always make sure that you know that and then have all your obligations and know what to do and when to do them. Now, what are the types of tenancy we have? You should know the kind of tenancy we have. We have periodic tenancy. Periodic tenancy are the tenancy which most of us operate, or which is usual or normal in Nigeria, which is the one that goes from time to time. So if it's a monthly tenancy, it runs from month to month to month to month. If it's a yearly tenancy, it runs from year to year. So that's one type. Then we have a fixed tenancy. Fixed tenancy is the one where we agree that, okay, our tenancy is for 1 month. And after the 1 month, it expires or it terminates. After the 1 year, it expires unless it is renewed. We have a tenancy at will. Tenancy at will is where your rent has expired in your house, but with the consent of your landlord, you're staying over the rent. And then finally, we have tenancy as sufferance. Tenancy as sufferance is where your rent has expired. You are the one refusing to leave. Your landlord wants you out. So you're therefore a tenant as sufferance. And like as I mentioned earlier, the relationship between a landlord and a tenant is a contract. So as also emphasized by the last speaker, it is very important that contracts are written down. So, and the best way to write a contract between a landlord and a tenant is by a tenancy agreement. So a tenancy agreement is very, very important. So we know there are situations where we go into a compound and we see the landlord and probably it's an old man, and then we just talk over drinks or whatever it is, and we shake hands, and then probably make a transfer to him, and he tells us, okay, this is the key, carries us and shows us the house, and then we go in. Yes, that is also a valid contract because, of course, like that type of tenancy, you have oral contracts, but it's very important that it's written down. And tenancy agreements should always be written down. Part of the things that you must make sure are in your tenancy agreement are the parties. The parties are who is the landlord, who is the tenant. It must be stated. It is very important. You should also state or describe the property in as much detail as possible. Now, an example of this is you could have an agreement with a landlord. Say you want to rent a 3-bedroom apartment or a 3-bedroom duplex and the BQ. Now, while discussing this, in your mind, you're going to pay the rent of 7 million, 8 million because there is a BQ attached. The landlord, on the other hand, is just giving you a 3-bedroom and you agree for 7 million. On the time or when it gets to the point where you want to come and take possession, you want to enter inside the house, you now finish fixing the 3-bedroom, you want to go into the BQ, and landlord tells you, no, the BQ is not for rent. But like, I thought the BQ was there, that's why I paid this rent. He said, no, it's not there. But if you had the tenancy agreement written down, you would have described the property as a 3-bedroom and a BQ. So if that is not written, then you know that we have a problem. We now have to start going into mediation or arbitration or litigation, as Mr. Marks has said. So to avoid that, we should describe the property in much detail as possible. And then we should also state, your tenancy agreement should state the tenure, meaning when does it start, where does it end, from 1st January 2025 to 31st December 2025. That must be stated expressly. And then also the rent payable. How much is the rent? It should not be something that should be left to imagination. It should be stated in a tenancy agreement. And finally, you should be put into possession, meaning you should be handed over the keys to the house. It's also very, very important. Now, move on to the obligations of the landlord and the tenant. Well, I'll just mention in passing, but if there's any particular issue you have or question you'd like to ask, during the Q&A, we can always ask them. Just send them to the link there. So obligations of the landlord include quiet possession. Quiet possession means the tenant should be able to enjoy the house. The landlord should not be prognosing into the tenant's every affairs, and that you should not be monitoring the tenants, whether when he goes out or when he comes in, as long as, of course, it's not being unreasonable. So you should allow him to enjoy quiet possession. Quiet possession also means that the landlord should not be interfering or coming to the tenant's house every now and again. Another obligation is maintenance and repairs. So the landlord, it's the duty of the landlord to maintain and repair the house at every point, if possible, yearly. I know most landlords don't do that in Abuja, but God will help them. So by maintenance and repairs, it's the duty of the landlord to repair the fixtures. By fixtures, I mean the things in the house that affect the structure. So the roof is the duty of the landlord to fix. The walls are the duty of the landlord to fix. The frames, door frames, so anything that affects the structure of the house, it is the duty of the landlord to fix. Another duty of the landlord is to provide basic amenities. So provide light, provide water. Now, I'm not saying that the landlord should pay your rent, your water bill or your light bill. But what I'm saying is that he should bring or draw light into the house. He should draw water into the house. It is now the duty of the tenant to pay for the light and for the water that he's using. Then it's also important that the landlord, the duty of the landlord, if you're a landlord here, please return caution fee, security deposits. Landlords don't like returning security deposits for whatever reason, but it's your duty to return security deposits. And then on the part of the tenants, your number one duty is to pay your rent, because it is like the foundation which you stand on to now ask for any other right that is involved. So you have to pay your rent and pay it on time. You have to use the property or the house for the purpose of which it was given to you. So if it was given to you to use as a residence, do not turn it to an office. It was given to you to use as an office, do not turn it to a residence. Please, it's very important. And also to do maintenance. Maintenance on the part of the tenants is for fittings. What constitutes fittings in a house are simple things like if your tap head is bad, you don't expect your landlord to come and change the tap head for you. The door handle is bad, that's something you should fix. If your light switch is spoiled, something you should call an electrician to come and fix. So that's not the duty of the landlord to do all that for you. Then finally, you should comply with all the terms and conditions in your tenancy agreement. Now, how does the tenancy end? This is also very important because I know most of us have always having issues. Landlords and tenants always have issues when it comes to how tenancy should end. Either the tenant wants to leave the house or the landlord wants the tenant to leave the house. What are the procedures that should be followed? Now, one of the ways by which a tenancy expires is by effluxion of time. By effluxion of time, I mean the tenancy runs its course. It just starts from January 1st of January 2025 till 31st of December 2025. By 1st of January 2026, the rent tenancy has terminated, it has expired. So that is natural way for it to end. And it could also be terminated by non-payment of rent, and it could also be terminated either by the landlord or the tenant by breach, where the tenant or the landlord does not abide by the conditions and terms in the tenancy agreement. Now, another thing that always brings issues is the notice period. It is a half yearly, like 6 months rent, tenancy period. Your notice period should be 3 months. And then where the tenant pays the rent for 1 year, it's a yearly tenancy, the notice of period should be 6 months. I must raise a caveat here. This notice period, especially for the 1 year of 6 months, only applies when your rent is still subsisting. I mean, when your rent has not expired. That is when the 6 months apply. If your rent has expired, you are no longer a yearly tenant. You automatically revert to a tenant at will. And remember, I say tenant at will means you are just staying over because the landlord allowed you to stay. And the notice period allowed for a tenant at will is 1 week. So if your rent has expired, the amount of notice you are due, or that is due to you, is 1 week. So the only time you have a claim is where the landlord wants to send you out of the house and your rent is still existing. Then you can insist on your right to get the actual amount of notice. Now, what are the procedures for recovery of premises? So if your landlord wants to take you out, or as a landlord you want to end the tenancy of your tenants, you have to serve statutory notices. Statutory notices are the notice to quit. You must serve the tenant's notice to quit. And then you must also serve what we call owner's intention to recover premises. So you inform the tenant that you want to go to court to go and recover premises. That must also be served. After which, or at the expiration of these statutory notices, we now you file the case in court. After the case in court, the case will take its turn, you get judgment, and then the court officials will come and enforce the judgment. Emphasis on the court officials. No landlord or his friends or agents or representatives are allowed to evict any tenants. They do not have such power. Only the courts can give such power. The law frowns seriously at people taking laws into their hands to unlawfully evict tenants. That being said, that's the duty of the landlord. On the part of the tenants, we should also know that there's what we call men's profit in law. Men's profit means if you hold over a house for a number of time or for a period, you are going to pay the rent for that period. Tenants in our normal way will say, okay, landlord, take me to court now. If you take me to court, at least the case will stay for like 3 to 6 months. In that period of 3 to 6 months, then I would have stayed over and then until I get the house. We should know that if the landlord applies to court and asks the court for men's profit, the court will calculate the amount of rent the landlord would have collected for the period you stayed over until the day you leave the house. So let's say, for example, you're a yearly tenant and your rent is 120,000 a year. And then you stayed over the house plus the court's time, the time that it took for the court's case to go on till judgment, and you stayed over for 3 months. The court will divide 120,000 by 12 months. That's probably 10,000 per month, and then multiply by the number of months you stayed, which is 3 months. You must still pay that 30,000 before you leave. So let's also have that at the back of our mind. And we should know that the court that has jurisdiction to entertain matters, tenancy matters, is generally the magistrate court, or district court as we call them in Abuja. But it's also important to note that the district court in Abuja has the jurisdiction limit of 7 million. So if your rent is less than 7 million as a landlord, the proper place to go or to take your tenants to recover possession is the magistrate court. But if the rent is above 7 million, then you have to go to the high court. So important to note that. So with that, I've come to the end of my tenancy, or the tenancy segment of my presentation. The next segment we're going to is to the real estate development and investment segment. Now, we should understand the kind of properties that are there, because like Mr. Hunle said earlier, for those who came in earlier, we in the Lawyers SFG, we are looking at working together with real estate, well, first and foremost, the real estate SFG in the church, and also people that are into real estate, to see how we can work together to help parishioners, and then members of church, the SFG, and generally body of Christ, see how we can gain or to get properties so that we can make passive income in the process. So the type of properties or investment we can have, residential properties. Residential properties are homes, apartments, duplexes, the one we live in. We have commercial properties, office buildings, shopping centers, hotels. We have industrial properties, factories, industry parks, warehouses, and then we have bare land. Those are the kind of investment or properties we can go into. Now, ownership structure, there's what we call freehold type of ownership. This is where the person owns the land absolutely. But I also would like you to note that there's no more freehold ownership in Nigeria since the Land Use Act came into effect. That the Land Use Act 1979 now abolishes all types of ownership and then grants all ownership in land in a territory of a state to the state governor. So that brings me to the second part, or the second type of ownership, which is the leasehold. And this is where ownership is owned by an absolute and it is given to someone else to hold. Now, by the Land Use Act of 1979, all land in your state is given to your state governor to hold in trust for the citizens of Nigeria. And in FCT, the lands in the FCT is given to the minister of the FCT to hold in trust for Nigerians. And so that is why we see that in our land documents, our CFO and all those other ones, it is always written for a period of years, either 99 years, 92 years, 50 years. It is your governor or the FCT minister that gives it to you. And it's also interesting to note that even the federal government of Nigeria, if the president of Nigeria wants a land to build or do anything in any state, he has to go and meet the governor of that state to give him land to use. How powerful are these governors? Now, the real estate investment in Nigeria, the opportunities. So we know that since we are over 200 million, the last census I conducted in Nigeria was 2006. So we don't even know how many we are right now, but I think we're about 240 estimatedly. And with this, we know that there's a high housing deficit in Nigeria. In fact, by the last estimation, it's about 28 million deficits, housing units. I will need 28 million. And the Federal Ministry of Housing has said that to cure these deficits, we need at least 5 million units every year. 5 million units of housing every year. So that is how serious and how dare we need this. And of course, we know where there's a need, that is where there's an opportunity. So if we can go into real estate, we would definitely be doing well financially. Now, what are the types of investment we can go into? We have residential or commercial property renting, office spaces, residential buildings, whatever it is that we can do to get people to rent. That's a good way of making money. We have land banking, where we buy a plot of land, an empty plot of land, and then allow it, after some years, to gain value, and then we can sell at a higher premium. We can also go into where we have liquidity, when there's cash. We can go into property development, where we buy, we build, and resell at a higher value. And then we can also go into real estate investment groups, like our RED project, where we come together, pool some resources together, and then get properties for ourselves to use for whatever I want to use it for. Probably residential or commercial renting also. And then we have the short-term rental and hospitality investments. We that know that Airbnb service apartments are doing so well in Abuja. So that's another place that we should like to look into. Now, what are the key documents that regulate real estate transactions in Nigeria? We have the CFO. The CFO is the title document that's given by government. We know how important that is. It is the absolute power of absolute grant by the government, giving you that to give you value for your property. We have the deed of assignment or power of attorney. That is the document or the instrument that's used to transfer land or title to the other. By title, I mean ownership. So it is either a deed of assignment or a power of attorney that is used to transfer. When you want to buy a land, there are important documents that you need to look out for or you need to get from the seller of the land. The power of attorney or a deed of assignment is very important. In the FCT, if you're buying in the FCT, transferred by means of a power of attorney. So if it's a bare land, what you should get from the seller is a power of attorney, very important. And if there are developments on the land, you need to get a deed of assignment. But as lawyers, we generally advise our clients to just get all of them. Get the sales agreement, get the power of attorney, get the deed of assignment. So whatever it is in any land registry, you'll be covered. Yes. So we have the contract of sale or sales agreement. That is the one that states the conditions of the sale. What are the duties of the landlord? What are the duties of the buyer, the purchaser of the plot? Then also, as mentioned earlier, I said all the land in the state, in the territory of a state belongs to the governor of that state, or in the FCT belongs to the minister of the FCT. So a land transaction cannot be sanctioned without the consent of the governor or of the minister. So it's very important also that it gets application for consent signed by the seller of that property. And then we have, of course, the survey plan showing all this thing. So now, because of time, let me rush. For steps in acquiring real estate, we should conduct our due diligence. What are your needs? What do we think you need? Do you want to go into commercial properties or private residential properties? Then you should know that. You should also check for budgeting. What is your budget? What do you think the amount you have to spare? It is what you need and the budget you have that will now help you to go and search for property. Now, searching for property, you should engage real estate agents, and so on and so forth. And then very importantly, you should do site inspection. It is very, very important. Before you buy any plot, you should do site inspection. Go there and go and see it. Because there are times that you've just seen pictures or videos of a place, you go and buy it. Then on getting there, you now see that either there's a deep gully that runs through the place, or there's a swampy area, or one thing or that. Maybe the video did during dry season, and everywhere was cool. Then later in rainy season, you see that the whole place is filled up with swamp. So it's very important that we do site inspections. Verification, legal verification. You should make sure that you get lawyers to verify the title, then go ahead to make your payments, and then after purchasing and having your documents, you should go ahead to register your plot of land. So these are the rudiment points or rudimental points I should note. I'm sure if you have any questions during the Q&A session, we'll be able to take them. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Godfrey. I believe we all now have a better understanding on landlords, tenancy, and real estate issues. So I'm just going to run through quickly everything that we have done so far today. So we started by telling you what TJLC is all about. Then we talked about the new tax regime. And we talked about common needs for lawyers in the parish in House on the Rock. We talked about alternative dispute resolution. We talked about intellectual property issues. We went ahead to discuss contract and regulatory compliance. And now we've just finished with real estate and tenancy issues. So I want to believe that we all have questions. And the QR code is still up for you to scan your questions. And we also have mics by the side of the hall for people who would want to engage in person. And so we're going to go into a panel session where we'll be inviting all our speakers back on stage to take your questions. And I will be welcoming Chijoke Ochogu, who is going to moderate the panel session. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. This is going to be more of an interactive session. So I would encourage... Mr. Godfrey Obuja. was the presence of a Leonard silk. Oh, okay, he's not here. Okay, when the Leonard silk is here, thank you so much to our guest speakers. Thank you so much for pouring out. We know that if we were to take your hourly rates, definitely not be getting all of this for free. But we really appreciate you for pouring out everything like the whole 9 years. So we'll just go straight to questions. We have a few questions already. Sorry. We've taken this set of questions before. So please can you scroll? I think I'll prefer to stay here so that I can see the questions. Thank you. Okay, while we're waiting for that to be done, I think I just have a few questions that we'll just start with. Mr. Max, this is for you. Okay. We talked about intellectual property, and there was something you said that I noticed the audience, erupted. It was when you were talking about copyrights and all of those, especially when it had to do with photography. So someone beside me asked me a question, and I'm going to put it to you. Right? Okay. So he says something like, yes, the photographer has rights in creative expression, and it is his pictures. So the photographer then goes ahead to post this intellectual property expression, of course, on his social media page. And him is a private person. So what are the remedies? This person is saying you're breaching my privacy. So there's now a conflict of privacy and, of course, copyright rights. How do you solve this?
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, it's actually a very practical issue. So there's always that tension between copyright or intellectual property, or copyright particularly, and privacy. And the reason is because ownership of copyright is different from subject matter. So the fact that I'm the subject of a copyright work does not mean that I'm the owner of the copyright. So practical example, there was a case where a person wrote a love letter to a woman, and both of them died. And subsequently, the woman's children wanted to sell that love letter to a magazine. And the man's children sued that would be a violation of copyright. That while the physical letter belongs to the woman, the copyright in terms of the right to control how that letter is used, which is what copyright is, belongs to the man and his estate. So that shows you that there's a difference. So the fact that you are the one in a picture does not mean you own the copyright. But yes, you are correct that you have a constitutional right to privacy. So if you commissioned a photographer to take pictures at your wedding, his brief is simple: take the pictures, make photo album, and hand over the pictures to me. But for him to go further to now publish those pictures on his social media handle will be violating your privacy, and also even violating the contract on the basis on which you commissioned him to take the pictures. So what we must understand is that copyright is about controlling the right to exploit works. So it means that if you take the picture the photographer took for you and you show people when they come to your house in non-commercial use, you are not violating the photographer's copyright. But the moment you now make commercial use of those pictures yourself without an agreement between you and the photographer, then at that point you are violating the photographer's right. So that's why I say the solution to all of this, which is the basis of everything we are saying here, to avoid all these stories that touch, there should always be written agreement. Even a simple email, even a WhatsApp message. You are taking these pictures for me. Note that the terms and conditions of this agreement is simple. You cannot use my pictures. That's you now, the person who commissioned the work. You cannot use my pictures to advertise your work on your social media. If you are the photographer, I can explain to the person, look, this is how I let people know the quality of work I do. So if both of you can now agree that selected pictures can be used to show his work, that can be agreed. But not that he takes your whole photo album and uploads. So to avoid all these tensions and all these questions, that's why I say there should always be a written engagement. So just to know that the regular everyday things you do, like all my brothers here have said, they all have legal implications. As simple as you are commissioning your new office, you want somebody to come and take pictures of the commissioning ceremony, and then later you now want to use some of the pictures from the commissioning ceremony on your website. He has a right to sue you to prevent you from doing that if you do not have an agreement with him. So to avoid all of this, always have an agreement. Even if it's a simple WhatsApp or email message, at least that will ensure that there will be no further arguments. Thank you.
Thank you. Still speaking of contracts, there's another question. A landlord and a tenant, they've gone into a tenancy agreement. But my brother in the real estate industry, you know what I'm talking about when I say houses are quite, to get house in Abuja, it's almost by connection. Then you then see a house, you like it, they say pay. They have not even given you, your tenancy agreement to review. And for some people, they don't just go on without a tenancy agreement. For some people, they would later bring a tenancy agreement that they may not even care to review. But now the question is, I even have stayed in this house 1 year, 2 years, whatever the years has been, and I'm here, I've listened to what you've presented, and I'm saying, how do I then amend, how do I put a remedy to this error already? I've already stayed in the house maybe 1 year, 2 years, and I'm even scared. What if I go to my landlord, like I'm already seeing a question that says, my landlord just increased my rent from 300 to 600K, is this increment not outrageous, something like that. But then again, I'm even scared. Okay, I approach my landlord to protect my rights as a tenant, and I'm also scared that he may increase my rent. So if somebody is in this dilemma, what do you think the person should do?
Thank you very much. The first one, or the first one, sorry, the first one was where the house are hot cake and pay. There's nothing wrong with being in the office and imagine that though we need lawyers to understand the nitty-gritty, most times these agreements are written with English words. At least by going through the agreement, just see what it is. And if there's anything that looks not comfortable to you, probably have a lawyer's number you can call and ask questions. Oh, I'm seeing a clause in my financial agreement that says this. Is it okay for me to proceed? I would not feign ignorance of what you say. I also just recently went through my own dilemma of months and months of searching for a house. I finally found one. So I would say that just try to ask for the tenancy agreement. Just ask for the tenancy agreement. Go through it as fast as you can. The things that makes you uncomfortable. Because to be sincere, the problem you would go through after you've signed that agreement will be worse than losing that house. That leads me to the next question, which is the increment. Landlords increase rent as they can sleep and wake up on the left side of the bed and just increase rent. And if you check your tenancy agreement, it's mostly written there that the landlord can increase the rent at any time. In fact, you even tell you that this rent will expire by this time, and then by next year, we will renew it at an amount that is suitable to the landlord. So when you see a clause like that, automatically you should raise red flags. And if you can, avoid that. Because if you go ahead to sign the agreement, you have already signed your dead warrant, if I'm to call it that. And by the time it's increasing, there's nothing you can do about it. So if we can, let's just avoid signing agreement or going to tenancy without looking at and signing tenancy agreements that will hurt us later. I don't know if that were all the questions. All right.
Hello. Okay, so I just want to add, the Bible says wisdom is profitable to direct, so that those of us that probably we are already enjoying smooth relationship with our landlords presently, we won't go back home and start demanding for tenancy agreement. See, why we need this tenancy agreement is that the Bible says the heart of a man is desperately wicked. Who can know it? So, oftentimes than not, there has to be meeting of the man. But outside the fact that you have your tenancy agreement documented and reviewed, what is important is under the Tenancy Recovery of Premises Act or relevant law, there are what we call implied obligations from both the landlord and the tenant. So, as a landlord, even without formalizing the agreement, there are expectations that are sacrosanct. But now, there are now conditions that maybe, if you see now that we now start having issues of tenement rate, it's now something that is just coming up under the new administration. So now, imagine if it has not, in my own place where I stayed, when it came, I said, okay, I'll just pay. But it may not be convenient for you. And no sooner that I paid, my landlord now gave me a notice of increment. And I was regretting, like, why did I have to pay? So what we are saying in essence is that if your relationship at present is sweet and you are not having issues, you don't need to start pressing it that by fire, by force, give me, because it's just like you are looking for something that is not lost. But before you start or you move into a tenancy, you may have to be sure that you get some of this sorted out so that, for instance, your roles and responsibility expectations in terms of maintenance, what amounts to minor repairs, major repairs, what amounts to fee payment, all this would have been resolved so that it won't be a back and forth issue between you and your landlord. So let's just get this so that we don't make troubles because of what has transpired here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Yes, wisdom is direct. Okay, the next question says, I own 40% of a tech company started in 2019. I think I'm just going to rephrase the question. The person owns 40% of a tech company that started in 2019, and their partner has quit after 6 months, but still runs the company under same name. So how can he exit the company and also get fair settlements? To this question, there's the tech parts, there's the IP parts, and then, of course, there's the contract part.
Okay, so we have what is called generally partnership agreement, and that's part of the agreement we're looking at. And I want to believe that I wouldn't know whether that partnership agreement translated into the incorporation of that company, because you could have a kind of pre-contract, contract stage, and the formalization of your contractual relationship. So, for instance, let's assume that you have your templates, your tenancy, your partnership agreement before the formation of the company itself. Definitely you have your share percentage, and then issue of dissolutions and all of that ought to have been part of your partnership agreement, which is in the primary agreement that you now, before the formation of the company. Now, having exited or intending to exit the company, all you need to do is for a resolution of the company to be made, passed, that, your share is now being, dissolved. And so this arrangement must have been written. Where it is not written, all you need to now do is to speak with your partner, get your, what do you want to take? Because already the company is a going concern. Do you want to be paid off? And that's where you need the service of a lawyer who will be able to advise you on the best way to approach it, because definitely your partner will continue to enjoy the image right and the right over the company so that you can get payoff in one way or the other. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just add to that. In fact, this is a very practical issue. So if you have watched the Facebook movie, this is exactly what happened. Mark Zuckerberg and the guys he founded Facebook with, they were in the dormitory, they founded the company. After a while, some of them moved on, started, working somewhere else. And then suddenly, after a while, Mark Zuckerberg hit it big. And then those guys came back and said, where's my share? And it's like, why will you ask for your share? You left the company, and then you are suddenly coming back afterwards and you want your share when, things are suddenly on the rise. So one of the solutions that is, like he's mentioned, you should need to have a partnership agreement, or usually in the tech circles, we call it a co-founders agreement, where these things are stated very clearly. Who owns what? And there's also what we call a vesting arrangement, where you can agree that, look, potentially you own 40% of the company, but that 40% will not become yours automatically, except you meet certain criteria. So the criteria would be, for instance, you have to stay faithful to the company for 4 years, and for each year in those 4 years, 25% of that, of the 40% you own, or 1/4 of it, will be vested each year. Sometimes you can put the trigger as performance metrics. So you can say you are the chief marketing officer. If we launch our app and the app hits 10,000 downloads, automatically you get 10% of your shareholding. If we hit 100,000 downloads, you get 70% of your shareholding. So that way you are incentivizing loyalty over the long term. Because we know how startups are. Everybody, when you're starting up today, you are still in NYC. You know, somebody's parent come and say, what are you doing with your life? Doing technology startup, crypto. Leave those things. Come and work in Federal Ministry of Finance. And it moves him away. And then suddenly, 3 years down the line, the company now gets funding from a private equity investor who wants to inject $10 million into the company. The man who went to Ministry of Finance suddenly comes back and is claiming his share. So that's why there needs to be an agreement. Then on the other side also of this type of scenario, that's already become a challenge. Where you go to mediation, for instance, because I've had a case close to this. What was agreed simply is that one person wanted to continue using the brand of the company. The other person wanted to leave. The person who wanted to continue using the brand, of course, did not have money to pay off the other person immediately. You can reach a mediated settlement that says, fine, continue using the brand, but instead of the 40% now, depending on how long it takes for the company to get funding and scale, we can agree a scale that says, if the company hits it big in 2 years, then that my 40% will become 10%. If the company will become 30%, sorry. If the company hits it big in 5 years, it means the effort of the person who remained there was more. Then instead of 40%, you only get 10%, like a graduated scale. So there are many ways to work on it. Then you agree so that way the company can keep running. The person who is leaving, even though he's not getting cash immediately, knows that any day there's a big payday, he will not get, because, even if you agree to take 10 million and leave, what if the company gets funding and suddenly becomes a 10 billion naira company? You have lost sort of. But if you structure it properly, you are sure that however it goes, what you will get will still be sort of a percentage, but it's now dependent on, the time to scale for the company. So it can be quite complex, but it's something that also still needs negotiation. But to avoid all of this, again, I'll come back to what we keep saying. At the beginning, there should have been a partnership or a co-founders agreement. If there was, then there would be no argument at this point. But we know with startups, lots of these guys are young, energetic. They don't have the time for all that talk and getting a lawyer and all until there's trouble. But even now that there's trouble, it can still be remedied. There was a relationship before. Try to preserve that relationship. Let it not end, in an outright fight that ultimately you get to a point where you have destroyed the relationship. So there are still ways to go about it to ensure that you can save that relationship and possibly in the long term, everybody benefits mutually, from that transaction. Thank you.
Thank you. You've done justice to the question. That's why it's very important to involve a lawyer. From the very start, even before you get to that stage where the business picks up and, blows up. Yeah, so we have a question. It says, I currently have a tenant in my property who sublet it to another before her tenancy expired. Can I kick the current tenant out? Please advise.
Legally speaking, was there a tenancy agreement? So one of the terms that tenancy agreements would usually include is a clause not to sublet, and then it will also say that if you're going to sublet, it should be with the consent of the landlord, first had and obtained, or in writing, something like that. So I'll say, legally speaking, what does the tenancy agreement say? If there's no tenancy agreement, well, yes, you might, but borrowing from the words of my brother, wisdom is profitable to direct. Now, if this new tenant is not giving you issues, he's paying his rent, and so on and so forth, let's just let it be. Thank you.
Sorry. That is why if you have had a tenancy agreement at the beginning, part of the clauses would have been not to sublet. Now, that is why we talked about the element of contract. There has to always be meeting of the mind. And sometimes we overlook some of these things. Like I talked about the issue of even as common as taking a boat ride to church. It's a contractual relationship that you're already, appropriating at that level. So now, where, for instance, you have a tenancy agreement, what you are expected to do is to treat where you would have inserted a clause not to sublet or not to carry out an act within the premises without your prior notice or consent. So where you now have a breach of that obligation that has already been put down into writing, you will now treat that type of tenant in occupation now as what? As a squatter. And as a squatter, he will only be entitled to notice of owners, 7 days notice of owner's intention to recover possession. Because why? You are not going to even treat him as whether a yearly tenant or whatever. Because in law, if you take such a tenant to court, on what right is he occupying your premises? But when you do not have a defined relationship, probably your tenant may be smarter, maybe he's traveling out of town or is relocating and all of that. He will just rent it out to somebody else, and that may not have the character being brought into your compound or into your premises may not be somebody you agree with. And these are part of the reasons why we say you should get your contractual relationship documented. But I know people don't want to pay lawyers oftentimes than not. I also know, like, I've had issues where somebody approached me and said I should just give him the endorsement page, the front page. I'm talking about a tenancy agreement worth almost 15 million naira, and he's asking me that he wants to give me 500,000 naira. No, is it 300,000 naira? That I should just give him my seal and the first page so that he will go and use what other lawyers have done for him and just copy it. You can see what we're saying. And I'm not that kind of a lawyer, so I just told him that you can go and get a lawyer that will do that for you, because you must know, your worth, and that's just that. So be ready to pay how many percent? 10%.
10% for the lease, then 5% if you get someone to review it.
Okay. So, and even to just review your tenancy agreement, you won't have to pay too much. I think 5%.
Yes.
That will be okay, so that lawyers can also continue to survive. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, still, I think a lot of tenancy questions, and that's because that's like real life issues, right? And I think I'll also like to add, for the person who has a subtenant right now, maybe you should approach the subtenant and let them know that there's a new sheriff in town. You either take the tenancy agreement or you leave the property. Harsh much. Sorry. Okay, so let's get into it. The next question says, okay, when you were presenting, Mr. Okoa, you talked about notice to quit and all of those subsisting when the tenancy agreement is still subsisting. Yes. And, I noted down a question, and funny enough, same question is on the screen. Some landlords can be mischievous, and they wouldn't give you that notice to quit. They would let you wait for the tenancy to elapse, and then they'll tell you, oh, there's no need to renew. Just like we are seeing now, the caretaker insists that there's no need for a tenancy agreement, and this person says he cannot contact the landlord. And even in this person's case, the person says he has even paid the rent like 3 weeks ago, and the caretaker is saying that there's no need for a tenancy agreement. So we have 2 questions in one. First, what does one do when, you get a mischievous landlord who then says, no need to renew, and then leaves you as a tenancy at will, And the second is this person that is saying, I just paid 3 weeks ago, and the caretaker is saying there is no need for a, tenancy agreement. What kind of advice do you have for this kind of person?
Okay, CJ, to be sure, the first question is?
And is the landlord lets the tenancy elapse and does not agree to collect a renewal. Yes, and wants to evict you, something like that, without giving you the 6 months or 3 months or whatever notice as applies to your tenancy agreement.
So for the first question, which is where the landlord allows it to expire, now there is really nothing we can do to avoid that. But what I know is, if that landlord allows your rent to expire, and then it comes at the end of your rent to now issue you those notices, probably just the 1 week notice, and it takes you to court. The courts are usually, or the judges and the magistrates are usually human beings. So if you approach while you're in court and you let the magistrate know that you were just given notice to quit a week ago, so you need time. You need time to look for a house. I'm sure the magistrate or the judge will give you some months, either 2, 3, 4 months or 5 months, whichever one you might request. You might request for 6 months, and he might think, okay, it's okay to give you 3 months or so. So the courts usually do that. Once again, you pay immense profit. Doesn't mean that because the landlord asks you to leave, you not pay. You still pay for the 3, 4 months that you've lived. That is one. Number 2, we'll still go back to the issue of tenancy agreements. Now, if you had a tenancy agreement, I have had issues with landlords majorly, and that's why landlords don't like giving properties to lawyers, because they always give them problem. You cannot, in my tenancy agreement, state that you want to evict me, only give me 2 weeks notice. Or that if I want to renew my rent, I should give you 6 months notice to renew my rent. But if you want to terminate me, you have to give me only 1 week notice. That doesn't work. We would put in the tenancy agreement that even if the landlord wants to evict me, he has to give me 3 months notice. Or if he wants to increase, now it takes me back to one of the questions I forgot to answer, talk about rent increment. Unfortunately, in Abuja, we don't have any law regulating rent increments up and down, this silly and very mischievous thing we are seeing every day. Lagos people are faring better because at least there are laws preventing landlords from requesting for 2 years rent in ahead or to increase rents in particular stage and all that. In Abuja, we don't have it. So if your uncle or auntie or sister or brother is in the House of Reps, the House of Reps makes laws for Abuja. Please talk to them. They should make laws to regulate rent increments in Abuja, in FCT particularly. At least maybe from here it can trickle down the states. So that is it. So number 1, you can ask the court to increase or to give you time to look for a new house. Then your tenancy agreement, notice period should also be stated there where you can live. And then the second question is where the person refused to give you a tenancy agreement after you paid your rent. I don't know if you have his email address. Like Mr. Marx also said, send an email. I have requested for a tenancy agreement and you have refused to give me this. So just let it be on record that you requested for a tenancy agreement and he refused to give it to you. Then subsequently, you know how to go. If you don't have the person's email, I'm very sure you have his WhatsApp number. Send a WhatsApp image. Thank God, by a WhatsApp message, by provisions of Section 84, I don't think it's still of the new Act, of the Evidence Act. Yes, electronic evidence is allowed in court these days,
yes.
So that will also fly.
Screenshot it,
Yeah,
keep your receipts.
Screenshot it and save it somewhere.
So let me add a few things on that, because it's a big issue. This issue of just 3 days ago, my younger sister paid for a new place, and I told her don't pay the money until we see the agreement. So she went, got the agreement. So the first line of defense is do not pay until you get agreement and all of that. But on the flip side, also I want to let you know that as a tenant, sometimes not even signing a tenancy agreement actually, in a sense, benefits you. Because by law, the default state of the law favors a tenant technically more than a landlord. So for instance, if you have a tenancy agreement, the agreement can say, instead of the 6 months that he showed you for quit notice, that it will be 3 months. You understand? And like now that houses are scarce in Abuja, even in my younger sister's case, she really liked the house and all. So they put 7 days. I had to plead with the lawyer and say, okay, to make it 3 months quit notice. Typically now in Abuja, because it's suddenly now a landlord's market. Anything they put before you, if you don't sign, somebody else is ready to pay immediately and sign. So, but if you don't have an agreement, by default, you have the 6 months. If you do not have an agreement as a tenant, it means that by default, you are entitled to sublet the house at any point in time. So you can see that sometimes not having an agreement as a tenant actually benefits you. So it's even the landlord that needs to ensure there's an agreement for certain reasons. Number 1, issue of subletting. You as a landlord, you want to ensure that there's an agreement that says you cannot sublet, you cannot in any way part with possession of the house. You also want things like, he mentioned things like tenement rate. As a landlord, you want it to be spelled out clearly in the agreement. Who owes the duty of paying tenement rate and any new rate that the government will suddenly imagine out of nowhere. So I'm just saying that there are pros and cons, towards having an agreement and not having an agreement. But what you need to note is documentation. That's why, like you just mentioned now, even if the landlord refuses to give you an agreement, you do an email or a WhatsApp making it clear that I've just paid for this house and based on our discussions, I really want a tenancy agreement. So even if he doesn't give a tenancy agreement, you have evidence later to show that you requested for a tenancy agreement and you were not given.
Thank you so much. This will be our last question because we're running out of time. Oh, what?
If I may just add, I think many tenants are also oftentimes having this issue of renovations, carrying out renovations without consent. And when they approach us, they come, especially when maybe the relationship goes sour, they now want to start saying, but I did this, I did that, and all of that. Whether or not there is except where you have a contract, a tenancy agreement, where it is expressly stated to the contrary, the position of law under the Recovery of Premises Act is that all renovations or anything that has to do with, yes, I painted, I fixed this, I fixed that, when I move into the property, must be with the due consent of the landlord in what? In writing. So don't say, oh, I agree with the landlord, what's it called, verbally, and he asked me to go ahead. No, it has to be in writing. And like he has already said, thank God for we are now in a digital age. You don't necessarily need to start doing a long writing, what's it called, letter writing, dispatched by courier services. You can send a WhatsApp message, and the response from the landlord will be an evidence to support whatever position you take. I think I should just highlight that.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So the last question. The person says, I am in a situation where I have the contract documents with an investor for 1 year. And the document has not been signed. And this person has been receiving funds. Then the investor says the 1 year begins the day they sign the contract. What should he or she do?
That's an interesting question, but maybe a first general position is that note that even if a contract is not signed, but there's evidence that that contract has been exchanged back and forth, and on the basis of that contract, somebody has made a payment. The fact, because the general position of the law is that an unsigned contract is worthless. So if you come to court and the only thing you have is an unsigned contract, the law ordinarily will not enforce it. But where there's evidence that parties have started acting even on the basis of that unsigned contract, payment and all of that has been made, then that contract becomes binding. But in a situation typically of financing contracts have a peculiar way they work, different from regular contracts. So in a financing contract, for instance, you have what they call an effective date. An effective date typically might be the date that the last party to sign that contract signs it. It's usually used just for the purpose of when the contract starts running. But most of the financial obligations in that contract will have another kind of date. Sometimes they'll call it a financial close date. Sometimes they call it a long stop date. The reason is because of things like running of interest and all of that. That is why financial contracts particularly have multiple types of dating when it comes to them. So in a scenario where the person is, I would imagine that if there is a repayment obligation, for instance, and that contract has said 1 year from when the contract is signed, I would think what it means is 1 year from maybe when the money is advanced, because that's when, actually that money starts counting. But that's actually a big problem, and that's why there needs to be clarity. In other contracts, you can leave issue of date hanging, but in financial contracts, date is crucially important, because without dating, a lot of things can get muddled up. I think while you were speaking, you gave the example of the purchase right of first refusal and the person making a purchase and all of that. The moment it falls out of, there's a problem now. The question is, what of issue of interest? The learnership was telling us about compound interest, for instance. These are all things that come up in a financing contract that makes it very mandatory that in a financing contract, every type of date should be specified. The effective date of the contract should be stated. Sometimes it can be the date that is written on top of the first page. Sometimes it's the date written at the signature column. But you can see that the date written on the first page may be different in front of the agreement. The first person may sign today, and he signs tomorrow. So all of those arguments now become which date is now effective for counting, for instance, interest. So to avoid that, that's why in a financial agreement, there must be another clause that states clearly that for purpose of interest and other financial obligations, this is the particular date that is effective. So that needs to be done.
Thank you. you. I know I said this was our last question, but we have a question that I feel is common and will be beneficial to everybody, and it's still on tenancy. It says that a landlord breeds dogs in the compound, and the dogs stench, and they keep terrorizing people. And they're asking, is there a law to call the landlord to order, or what can this person do? That's an environmental...
Yes, I know we've been saying most time tenancy agreements. I don't think this one is usually captured in tenancy agreements. So yeah, it's an environmental issue. It's an issue you can complain, lay complaints to the relevant. I think Abuja is the Abuja Environmental
AEPB.
Protection Board, AEPB. You can lay a complaint on that. That is for the stench aspect, but for the harassment aspect, it's a tenancy matter.
Yes.
Tenancy matter. You can take the landlord to court. Yes, you're entitled to quiet. Remember, I mentioned quiet possession,
and peaceful
quiet
possession.
enjoyment of your rent or of the apartment. So you can take the landlord to court, but you should know that as you're taking the landlord to court, it means end of that tenancy, and then you now get compensation. But the important thing is you get compensation for that act. So really that.
And I must add, it's really simple, actually, to raise these issues. I've reported somebody before that was, it was not my landlord, though. Me, I did not take my landlord. It was someone that was causing nuisance in front of my compound. And I warned this person, and this person was like, now your father's house. And I'm like, okay, I know the owner of Abuja since I'm not the owner. So I wrote a letter, very simple letter, to the AEPB. And 1 week, they came. So you can just write a simple letter. I think their office is somewhere in central area. Yes, just drop it there and they would attend to it. Okay, I think that's the end. We can't take all of these questions because of time, but like we said, every Sunday, there's always a desk outside, the Lawyers SFG desk, so you can always walk up to us and ask any questions, and would always be happy to help. And maybe one last thing I would like to say is whenever you're entering into a contract, into an agreement, any relationship at all, always look at it. There's something that they always tell us in my office. When we are reviewing contracts and agreements, we don't look at it from the side of the two peaceful, loving father-mother or relationship. We look at it from the angle of there's already fights in front. What are the loopholes that we'll be looking out for? So it's always really important to involve your lawyers from the very beginning. Like there's an eye that they would always apply that you may not see as a layman, like we'll call. So thank you so much. We started with, thank you so much to our panelists. Please, a round of applause for all of them. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Mr. Okwa. Thank you, Mr. Ikombe. Thank you, Mr. Olutekumbo. Please forgive me. I'm Igbo. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. We started with prayers and started with opening remark, and it would also be nice for us to have this same person who welcomed us tell us, anything that he wants to give us in this discharge. So we'd welcome Mr. Kunle Oyenusi. Please, a round of applause for him. Thank you so much.
Thank you, CJ. Every good thing, you would agree with me, must come to an end. First of all, I'd like to say a very, very big thank you to everyone that has been here. The contract that we have with you this afternoon is that if you have stayed till the very end, you are entitled to lunch. And that is enforceable in court too. Okay? Now, there's a new law. In summing everything up, there's a new law that we must, as believers, also subscribe to. And I want to round up on that, and that is found in Romans chapter 12, verse 18. And it says that if it is possible, as much as it depends on you, we say, live peaceably with how many men? With all men. So we can take our landlords, our tenants, our investor, we can take them to court. But the first rule that we want to do is that we want to live peaceably with all men as much as it is possible. I moved into a new place, and my wife would always tell me, this is where we're living. We want to be at peace with everyone. Don't make it a place where where you live, you need peace of mind, okay? So let's live peaceably with all men. I want to thank everyone that has patiently waited with us, held faith with us till this time. Especially, I would like to just say a quick, big thank you to the SFG lawyers, the lawyers SFG, the board, the partners, everyone that has stayed with us, the ESCO, the compares, the speakers, and in absentia, let us thank Mr. Chuka Ikwezom, the senior advocate of Nigeria, who are taking us through the tax matters. I'd like to also extend a big thank you to the founder and president of the Jason Foundation, our own Johnny Hagin, SAN. Let's have a round of applause for him in absentia. I think he stepped out. I'm standing in for him, actually. And more importantly, we want to give a big thanks to the Almighty God, our Father in heaven, who has given us. I'm sure we can do better if we're clapping for God. Yes? God has been awesome, hasn't he? Always. He's a Father who is always awesome. A quick information for us before we just go. The TJLC is the Jason Legal Clinic, because I saw a question saying, what is the TJLC all about? It's an annual event. Next year, we're also going to have this, and we promise that we'll make it a little more interactive, because we see that there's a lot of questions still burning in your heart. So when we go for lunch, you can use that opportunity to also make it an interactive session to speak with a lawyer, speak with a friend, meet someone, talk about that issue that has been burning in your mind, and then I'm sure that you will definitely get an answer to it. But whilst we wait for the annual event, there is the legal aid desk that holds every Sunday outside here, just every Sunday. You can quickly stop over there, register your questions, and you can be sure that a lawyer will be assigned to listen to you and to give you a solution to your basic issues. If the issues are complex, then we will charge you, but we'll give you a huge rebate. Real Estate Development, the RED project, if you're interested in that, for those who came late, the Real Estate Development project is a project where we're going to be partnering with the church and the Real Estate SFG to see how we can invest in real estate development for members who can leave your names outside of the church. Without much ado, once again, a very big thank you to our leadership in the church. Pastor Uche, if you can hear us, we love you. We thank you. Let's clap for our pastor and the leaders of the church. Thank you for giving us this huge honor, allowing us to stay in the church premises to actually have this program. And once again, why don't you clap for yourself that you have been a member of this program. Thank you very much. Thank you. Shall we pray, or you still have something to say? Okay, let's be on our feet to pray. I always like for every one of us to just say a word to God. So let's lift up our hands and just thank God. However you want to say that, just appreciate God for the grace that we have enjoyed, for the knowledge, for the healing, for the hope, for the care, for the opportunity to serve that God has given every one of us today. And we return all the honor and the glory to our Father in heaven. Thank you, for in Jesus' mighty name we have prayed. Amen.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Please, let's have a seat so that we can all get our food. And we would love to have a photograph with everyone. I just want to say something. So the TJLC is today was the inaugural event. The legal clinic has now been opened. With this event that happened today, the legal clinic is open, and so you can reach out to any lawyer to get your free legal advice. Now, an event like this would happen again next year. So the event itself is annual, but the activity is continuous. I hope that is clear now. Thank you very much. So the order of photograph, we're going to have a photograph with everyone that came. Thank you so much for attending, every one of us. So we're going to have a photograph together. So once we all get our food, we just come on stage and we all take our photographs together. And next, all the lawyers in the specialized focus group, all the lawyers that are part of the lawyer specialized focus group would have their photo next. And then all our speakers would have their photos after that. And the organizers of the program will be the last. Thank you so much. Remember, the clinic is open now. This is time for networking. As we announced, it is a networking and free legal clinic. So now is the time to approach a lawyer and just have a conversation with them. But I will encourage that you please allow us to have the photograph first before you do that. Thank you so much. And see you next time when we have this event or at the legal aid desk. All right. Okay, so I believe we can all go up stage now. We all have our food. Please, let's climb the stage so we can take our pictures. Everyone, please, let's climb the stage. Please, thank you. Indulge us a bit more. Just climb the stage. Let's take a photo together so we can have record that you were here. I'm still seeing some people sitting down. You don't want to be part of our history. This is a history-making moment. We are launching the legal clinic. So please, let's come up. I'm seeing many people sitting. Let's climb the stage, please. Let's climb the stage. I'm seeing us sitting down. Yes, everybody. If you're in the hall, please climb the stage. CJ. Madam Jumoke? Lara? Oh, Lola? TJLC, the Jason Legal Clinic, TJLC. Just say TJLC, TJLC. All right, thank you. So the Lawyers SFG, if you're a member of the Lawyers SFG, please wait behind. With our speakers, please. All our speakers wait behind. And the Lawyers SFG. Okay. Please, if you've not gotten food, still wait behind. Still remain on your seat so you get food. And remember, the networking starts now. Okay? Don't be in a hurry to leave. We still get to network and interact with one another. If you're a member of the Lawyers SFG, please run down here. Our speakers remain on stage, please. Yes, Mr. Max. CJ, okay. Lola, are you here? Where's Lola? Okay. See her. Thank you. Now we have our speakers. All our speakers, please. Speakers. Okay. Speakers. Compare. CJ, come back.
Hold this for you. After you finish that one, I would like to join them for the other one. I should join now. Okay.
No more for the
I think we've done lawyers SFG.
Yes.
Let's
Sorry, sir. The Leonard Silk is back. Please, one more.
Okay, so
Yes.
Adolisa, please appeal to them to come back. Let's all take a picture. Should we do that?
I don't think so.
We should just do it.
Thank you. I just want to add that this legal clinic is the brainchild of our Leonard Silk, Johnny Agim. So let's just put a round of applause. Let's celebrate him. Thank you so much, sir. He has not been here because he had another meeting, but this was his idea. So thank you very much. It was nice having all of you. Remember to network and interact with lawyers and get answers to any questions you may have. Thank you.